Chapter 116. Deification Cultivators. Qin looked at the two men in front of him. He was more shocked than vigilant. Although he had heard from his master that soul formation stage cultivators did exist in this world, these old monsters had long gone into seclusion. No one had seen them for nearly 1,000 years. He didn't expect to see two of them at once. Zhong Muling looked up at him and narrowed his eyes. "Brat, I was in a good mood a few days ago and let you go. Why are you rushing into the formation today?" Qin quickly regained his composure and saluted him calmly. "Senior, please forgive me. Junior came to look for someone. I didn't intend to rush into the formation." "Looking for someone?" Yuan Bao looked at his clothes and asked, "Who are you looking for?" Qin answered respectfully, "Junior is a disciple of Xianqing school. I came to look for a fellow disciple and boldly entered the formation. Please forgive me, Senior." Yuan Bao and Zhong Muling looked at each other. They both understood what was going on. Zhong Muling had a good impression of this person who was willing to take the risk to rush into the formation for his descendant with a respectful attitude without the slightest hint of flattery. He said kindly, "There's someone, but I don't know if she's the one you're looking for. Tell me your name." Upon hearing what they said, Qin knew Mo Tiange was most likely here. Since these two deification seniors were very friendly, he said bluntly, "The person Junior is looking for is called Mo Tiange. I wonder if she's the person Senior mentioned?" Zhong Muling raised the corner of his mouth and stared at him meaningfully. "What's your relationship? You're willing to take such a big risk to save her?" Qin said, "Junior is her senior in the school, so I naturally tried my best to save her." Zhong Muling cast him a glance, then waved his hand. A golden sword flew from the sky and fell into his hand. "Three-yang real fire sword? Someone actually refined it?" Qin was stunned. "Senior knows this sword?" Zhong Muling let out a soft, umph. With a wave of his hand, he threw the three-yang real fire sword to Mo Tiange. "I've seen it in an ancient cultivator's handwritten notes. You're actually quite lucky to actually obtain this kind of ancient magic weapon." On the side, Yuan Bao laughed and said, "Aling, compared to the yang spiritual bead in his body, this three-yang real fire sword is nothing. Tiske, a yang spiritual bead. I really don't know what kind of luck this brat has to actually obtain such a rare treasure. If I had a yang spiritual bead, how could I have been stuck at the threshold of the deification realm for so long back then?" As he spoke, he kept glancing at Qin. Qin felt goosebumps all over his body from the malicious gaze, but he also knew that in front of a deification cultivator, he was nothing more than an ant. With his current strength, he simply couldn't resist what the other party wanted to do, so he quickly calmed down. "Senior has good eyesight. I do have a yang spiritual bead on me. I obtained it by chance in the past. After so many years, I finally managed to fuse it for my own use." His calmness somewhat surprised Yuan Bao. He turned around and said to Zhong Muling with a smile, "Aling, his willpower is comparable to yours." Zhong Muling said faintly, "Don't think everyone is like you." Although the tone was light, there was a hint of disdain in it. How could Ingot not hear it? He immediately shouted, "What do you mean?" "Nothing." Zhong Muling didn't even move his eyebrows. Without waiting for Yuan Bao to refute, he turned towards Qin and said, "Junior, for the sake of the three-yang real fire sword, if you walk out of this formation, I'll let you see the person you want to see." Right after he finished speaking, before Qin could answer, Zhong Muling waved his hand and disappeared along with Yuan Bao. Qin stared at the glaciers that filled the sky and frowned. Just as he was about to sigh, he suddenly clutched his chest and spat out a mouthful of blood. She pushed the door open and saw the person sitting cross-legged on the ground. She was startled and said, "Senior Martial Brother Qin." She didn't know that Zhong Muling, who was paying attention to the movements in the small room, was frowning slightly. After being startled for a moment, she immediately rushed over. From Zhong Muling's tone, she originally thought the person who came was Martial Uncle Shoujing. She thought she could finally see Martial Uncle Shoujing, whom she'd only heard of but never met. Unexpectedly, it was actually Senior Martial Brother Qin. Seeing Qin, made her feel both relieved and uneasy. She felt relieved because he was right in front of her, so his life wasn't in danger. However, she felt uneasy because his face was pale and his hands and feet were ice cold. It seemed like he couldn't hear her voice at all. His eyes were closed and he was motionless. It seemed like he was seriously injured. Mo Tiange approached him and touched his hand. Upon discovering that it was as cold as ice, she immediately called out, "Great Ancestor, what's wrong with Senior Martial Brother Qin?" After a moment of silence, Zhong Muling's voice rang out. This brat's vitality was injured in the illusory sky formation. You don't need to worry. Both his metal and fire spiritual roots are yang, and he also has a yang spiritual bead in his body. Ice and snow can't hurt him. His meridians are just temporarily frozen. He'll wake up after a while. Oh. Mo Chenga heaved a sigh of relief after hearing Zhong Muling's explanation. Seeing that Qin didn't move, she thought for a moment then sat down next to him. Right now, even Qin's eyebrows were covered in a layer of frost. Mo Chenga guessed this was probably the effect of an ice and snow bewildering formation similar to the desert bewildering formation she encountered before. However, why was senior martial brother Qin here? Great ancestor, she called out again. Zhong Muling answered. Can you help senior martial brother Qin? Zhong Muling paused for a while then said impatiently, it's not that troublesome. He just needs to adjust his breathing for a while and he'll be fine. But, shut up. It's noisy. Just squat down for me. Oh. Zhong Muling was obviously unhappy, so Mo Chenga didn't dare to say anything else. She just stood on the side and watched Qin in silence. In the past few days she obtained too many fated chances, so she temporarily forgot about the outside world. Now that she saw Qin she couldn't help but recall what happened before she came here. How did Feng Shui and Senior Martial Sister Wei go? Did they persuade Senior Martial Sister Wei? What if they didn't? Are they safe? Qin let his imagination run wild. After an unknown amount of time he suddenly moved. Mo Chenga hastily jumped up. Senior Martial Brother Qin. Qin moved his eyelids and slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was a joyful face smiling at him. Senior Martial Brother Qin, you've finally woken up. Qin closed his eyes again. When his breathing gradually calmed down, he opened his eyes and smiled. Chenga, are you all right? Seeing that the first thing he asked after waking up was her, Mo Chenga's heart skipped a beat. She smiled and said, I'm fine. How about you, Senior Martial Brother Qin? I'm also fine. It's just a small injury. I'll go back and slowly recuperate. After looking around, Qin stood up with some difficulty. This place is. With such dense spiritual aura, what kind of paradise was this? His own Immortal's Cave was located in the place with the densest spiritual aura on Clear Spring Peak. It also had a high-grade spirit gathering formation, but it was still much worse than this place. This is the Virtual Sky World. Virtual Sky World? Qin frowned slightly, wondering where he heard this name. Mo Chenga immediately said, Senior Martial Brother Qin, don't think too much. This is Senior Yuan Bao and my great ancestor's cave. Nothing will happen. Great ancestor? Yes. Mo Chenga nodded and said, I was also shocked when I first found out. My great ancestor's surname is Zhong, and his name is Mu Ling. He's also the master of this place. Could the master of this place be those two deification seniors? As he thought of this, Qin's eyes were filled with surprise and confusion. Great ancestor was his grandfather's grandfather. However, cultivators had a long lifespan, and they didn't know how many generations their children and grandchildren had. Great ancestor could also refer to an ancestor whose seniority couldn't be called, but there was one thing that was correct. These two people were related by blood. Could it be that one of those two deification seniors was related by blood to her? As soon as this thought appeared, Qin didn't know why, but he suddenly felt upset. Before he could figure out what was going on, he heard Mo Chenga say, I'll tell you about this in detail when we go back. Senior Martial Brother Qin, are you really okay? Qin smiled and said, I'm fine. Don't worry. I'll be fine after a few days of rest. What about you? Are you injured? Mo Chenga smiled and said, not only am I not injured, but I also obtained a lot of benefits. Mo Chenga released her aura and looked at him with a smile. Senior Martial Brother Qin, look at me. What's different about me? Qin sensed for a moment and was shocked. You advanced to the middle stage? Mo Chenga nodded happily. She didn't plan to tell him about the 5-spirit fruit, but she obtained the art of the origin and advanced to the middle stage. As long as she returned to Xianqing school, she definitely wouldn't be able to hide it, so she might as well tell him directly. She entered the middle stage of the foundation building realm less than a year ago. Although he had encountered a lot of fated chances, he was still quite surprised. However, when he thought of those two deification cultivators, he felt it was only natural. Qin smiled and said, Congratulations, congratulations. You're already in the middle stage of the foundation building realm at such a young age. You can be considered the first person in Xianqing school. And if you work hard, you should have a good chance of forming your gold core within 100 years. Although I'm not sure I can build my foundation building realm, I'll still accept your auspicious words. After a pause, Mo Chenga remembered something. Right, Senior Marshal Brother Qin, did you come to see me? And Qin, she nodded. I heard you went missing here, so I came to see you. Really? Senior Marshal Brother Qin, didn't you go missing with Marshal Uncle Shoujing? What about Marshal Uncle Shoujing? Qin, she paused for a moment, then said, we're all fine, but you said this place is your great ancestor's immortal's cave. Is it one of those two seniors? Mo Chenga nodded, then said apologetically, Senior Marshal Brother Qin, I'm really sorry. If I found out earlier, you wouldn't have been injured. It's nothing. Qin, she shook his head faintly. I'm not injured, so you don't have to be like this. Right, what's your situation now? Since your great ancestor is a deification senior, should he stay here? Mo Chenga shook her head and said, of course not. Right, Senior Marshal Brother Qin, you just woke up. Do you want to rest for a while? In any case, we still have time to talk. I'll go with you in a few days and then I'll slowly talk to you. Upon hearing this, Qin, she smiled. His heart instantly calmed down and he said, that's fine. This place is full of spiritual aura, so we mustn't waste it. We'll slowly talk when we get back. And you can continue healing. I won't disturb you anymore. After watching Mo Chenga leave the room, Qin, she sat down on the praying mat. Before he could heave a sigh of relief, a strong gust of wind suddenly hit him. He didn't have time to react at all, so the wind directly blew against his body. The spiritual aura inside his body suddenly surged uncontrollably, causing him to vomit another mouthful of blood. Zhong Muling's voice rang out inside the room. Why did you hide her identity? If you don't explain, don't blame me for taking your life. Chapter 117. When Mo Chenga walked out of the hut, she saw Zhong Muling standing by the pool with his hands clasped behind his back. It was unclear what he was thinking. She gently approached and greeted, Great Ancestor. After a long time, Zhong Muling finally moved. He glanced at her and said, You've stayed here for 7 days. It's time for you to leave. Mo Chenga nodded. Yes. Does Great Ancestor have any other instructions? You have your own opportunities. Why do you need me to instruct you? After saying that indifferently, Zhong Muling flicked his sleeve, causing a Chenkuan bag to appear on the table under the tree. I've already refined your spirit-concealing pendant. With it, you can even pretend to be immortal. Thank you, Great Ancestor. Mo Chenga didn't try to be polite. Her breath-concealing technique wasn't very good, but with this thing, it would be much more convenient for her to do things in the future. However, there were still many things inside. Great Ancestor, then that purple wooden cauldron is the pill furnace I used in the past. It's no longer useful. Since you're practicing alchemy, I'll give it to you. That silk handkerchief is a defensive magic treasure that can also be used for flight. I have already recorded the incantation on the jade slip. You have to walk the path of cultivation on your own. This is all I can help you with. Whether or not you can reach core formation, nascent soul, or even soul formation all depends on your own ability. Mo Chenga put these things away. She knew her fate with this great ancestor was over. They were soul formation cultivators, and they would go into seclusion for hundreds of years. They might not even set foot in this place for 1,000 years. They might not even see each other again in the future. Alright, I'll send you off now. Yes. Zhong Muling raised his hand, causing a dot of light the size of a broad bean to appear between his eyebrows. He muttered an incantation, causing the light to become brighter and brighter. Gradually, it turned into a huge bead and fell on his hand. Mo Chenga furrowed her brows as she stared at the bead. She stared fixedly at it. Zhong Muling didn't stop chanting. In the end, he cast an incantation on the bead, tearing a crack in the air. Go. Mo Chenga was about to speak, but before she could say anything, she felt her vision darken and then brightened. She had already disappeared from the virtual sky world. Mo Chenga raised her head and looked around. This was a hilltop and there was nothing around her. They'd probably already left. She sighed. She still had questions to ask. Chenga? Oh. Upon hearing Qin-Shi's voice, Mo Chenga turned her head around and was immediately gobsmacked. Qin-Shi seemed to be a bit unsteady on his feet, and his complexion was ashen. Obviously, his injuries hadn't healed yet. She remembered that her great ancestor clearly said his injuries weren't a hindrance, so how could this be? Senior brother Qin, what's wrong? Qin-Shi just propped himself up and shook his head. Let's go back first. After saying that, he didn't explain anything and summoned his flying sword, pulling her along as he flew towards Luoyan Cliff. Zhong Muling was meticulous. They were already far away from the forest. Qinshi's expression was very solemn. Mo Chenga only took a few glances at him but didn't say anything. In just a moment, they arrived outside the Luoyan Cliffs array formation. Once they stopped, Qinshi said, "After you go back, don't tell anyone about this in detail. If someone asks, just tell them I told you not to." "Oh, okay." Qinshi seemed to want to say something, but in the end he didn't say anything and just turned his head away. When Mo Chenga glanced at him, she saw a gloomy expression on his face. However, before she could say anything, the disciples in charge of patrolling came over. Soon after, the array was opened and they each went inside. After saying goodbye to Qinshi, Mo Chenga seemed to be lost in thought. The scene of Zhong Muling opening the virtual sky world kept appearing in her mind. When she returned to the tent, she didn't know where Luo Fengxue went, but there was no one inside. She sat down in her seat and thought for a long time. Eventually, she reached into her Chengkuan bag and rummaged for a while before taking out an object. It was a bead the size of a baby's fist. It contained spiritual aura and was very similar to the one Zhong Muling had. She obtained this bead after she killed that man from Clan on Mount Yunwu. In the past few years, she didn't know what it was used for, so she kept it in her Chengkuan bag without touching it. She didn't know whether this bead was the same as Zhong Muling's, but in terms of appearance, it was very similar. Moreover, even the spiritual aura it sensed was very similar. Zhong Muling's bead had been refined inside his body. The bead he used to open the virtual sky world was most likely a magic weapon related to the virtual sky world. Mo Chenga wondered if she could also obtain a virtual sky world with this bead in hand. Thinking up to this point, Mo Chenga couldn't help but let her imagination run wild. How good would it be if she had a portable immortal's cave like the virtual sky world? With such dense spiritual aura, spiritual plants would definitely grow quickly if she planted them. She could take them with her wherever she went and wouldn't have to worry about being discovered. The more she thought about it, the more her heart itched. However, just as she was about to ask about this bead, Zhong Muling sent her out of the virtual sky world. Now she had no one to ask. Even if she had this bead in hand, she could only sigh helplessly. Mo Chenga was about to throw the bead back into her Chengkuan bag when she suddenly remembered what Yuan Bao said. Yuan Bao once chatted with her and said the virtual sky world was a magic weapon that recognized its master. Unless the primordial spirit completely dissipated, other people couldn't take it away. But as long as it recognized its master, it couldn't escape those few methods. After thinking for a while, she suddenly had an idea. She immediately gathered her spiritual aura and lightly cut her fingertip. Blood flowed out and she dripped it on the bead. The bright red blood slowly sank into the white bead and gradually disappeared. All of a sudden she felt a sharp pain in her head. She felt countless information rushing into her brain in an instant. From the distant past era, birds and beasts, all kinds of spiritual creatures, cultivators and demonic beasts, many words, countless images, these things flashed in front of her eyes as if she had experienced them herself. It was as if someone had stuffed these things into her head. Pain, she didn't know how much time had passed. Maybe it was a long time or maybe it was only a moment, but her head gradually stopped hurting. Mo Chenga looked up and suddenly widened her eyes. She wasn't sitting in the tent on Luoyan Cliff, but in an unfamiliar place with dense spiritual aura. Among the dense bamboo forest, several bamboo houses were faintly discernible. A winding brook bypassed them and flowed into the distance. A gentle breeze blew into her nose. It was the medicinal fragrance of spiritual plants. Bamboo forest, huts, brook, medicinal fields. She was ecstatic. This was the virtual sky world. Must be the virtual sky world. Mo Chenga suddenly stood up from the ground and ran into the hut. She didn't know how many years it had been since someone entered this hut. The floor was covered with a thick layer of dust, almost covering everything. She used a few simple spells. In the blink of an eye, the hut was spotless. There were tables and chairs made of spiritual bamboo, several praying mats scattered on the ground, and a bookshelf in the corner of the hut filled with books. She gently approached it, pulled out a book from the bookshelf and opened it. Written on it was an ancient language written with magic. The animal skin made of the book was soft and tough. She didn't know what demonic beast it belonged to. Closing the book, Mo Chenga had a strange feeling. She originally didn't know such ancient language, but she understood it at first glance. And she could recognize every single thing in this hut. She walked out of the hut and went around the bamboo forest. As far as her eyes could see, there were spiritual creatures of all sizes. There were trees, flowers, grasses, vines and countless spiritual creatures crowded together. The ground was covered with layers and layers of thick leaves. She didn't know how many years it took for the plants to grow and die on their own to produce such a scene. Emo Chenga finally understood. The virtual sky world was a spatial magic weapon left from the distant past era. After it lost its master, no one knew what it was. It fell into the hands of a man from the Yin clan and was eventually obtained by her. If she hadn't happened to enter Zhong Muling's virtual sky world, she probably wouldn't have known she had a rare treasure until she died. How much wealth did the spiritual plants accumulated in this virtual sky world for hundreds of thousands of years amount to? Especially the spiritual plants that were more than 10,000 years old. Any one of them could shock the celestial pole. Emo Chenga fell to the ground after touching a 10,000-year-old seven-withered grass with her own hands. She couldn't help but laugh dully. Ever since she embarked on the path of cultivation, she encountered a lot of bad luck, but fated chances were very few. This time, in just a few days, she encountered a series of fated chances that ordinary people couldn't encounter in their entire lives. The art of the origin, the five spirits body cultivation technique, the guidance of a deification cultivator, the gift from her great ancestor, and this virtual sky world. This gave her an unreal sense of happiness. But the spiritual plants were real, the soil was real, the hut was real, and the spiritual aura was real. With these things, would she still need to be confused about her future? Emo Chenga didn't know how much time had passed, but she gradually calmed down. No matter how many spiritual treasures she had, she was still a foundation-building cultivator. As long as she didn't reach the Great Tao, she wouldn't have the ability to protect herself. Besides, there was a demonic beast riot right now. Saving her life was the most important thing. With this thought in mind, Emo Chenga stood up and carefully observed this virtual sky world. Obviously, each virtual sky world was different. Zhong Muling's was a wooden hut and a pond, while this one was a bamboo hut and a bamboo forest and a brook. However, the spiritual aura was almost the same and they were both very dense. In addition, her virtual sky world had another advantage over Zhong Muling's. The spiritual plants and plants here were densely packed and had been growing freely for at least hundreds of thousands of years. Among them, there were countless 10,000-year-old spiritual plants that multiplied, squeezing the medicinal field to the point where there was almost no space to stand. Zhong Muling's virtual sky world, on the other hand, didn't have so many spiritual plants. Perhaps it was because he had been in the deification realm for thousands of years and had already used or collected some of the spiritual plants. Looking at the endless medicinal field under the breeze, Emo Chenga couldn't help but think that she had no choice but to practice pill concocting now. Most of these spiritual plants couldn't be taken outside. If she wanted to use them, she could only concoct them herself. Moreover, with so many spiritual plants, would she still need to worry about not having enough talent in pill concocting? Moreover, she could also collect as many ancient pill recipes as possible. In the current cultivation world, although ancient pill recipes still existed, most of them were useless because most of the spiritual plants had long disappeared from the world. Even if she had the pill recipes, she wouldn't be able to concoct spiritual medicines. But she didn't need to worry about this problem. There were so many spiritual plants here, which should have been planted by the former master of this virtual sky world. There must be spiritual plants commonly used in pill concocting. Even if some were missing, it would be enough for her to concoct several kinds of ancient medicinal pills. Thinking up to this point, Emo Chenga couldn't help but laugh. For the first time, she felt that her cultivation path would be a bright one. Chapter 118. Next, Emo Chenga heard several shocking pieces of news. First of all, the cultivators on Luoyan Cliff were about to disperse. Because the demonic beasts repeatedly failed to break through, the smart high-level demonic beasts scattered and destroyed everything around them. They had no choice but to split up and hunt. Second, there was news from East Kunwu that Danding School didn't have time to activate all the Great Mountain Protecting Formation before it was breached by a 9th-ranked demonic beast. They lost a lot of disciples and came to ask for help. Finally, it was said that Martial Uncle Shoujing was seriously injured and couldn't hold on anymore, so he had to return to Mount Taikong to recuperate. Upon hearing the first two pieces of news, Emo Chenga finally realized that the demonic beast riot was so serious that even a 9th-ranked demonic beast appeared, which was equivalent to a cultivator in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. The last piece of news gave her a strange feeling, and a thought flashed through her mind. But before she could think too much about it, Martial Uncle Xianin informed her that they had another important task and that she and Luo Fengxue should immediately follow him to Danding School. Emo Chenga didn't expect that the task of supporting Danding School would fall on them, so she felt a bit nervous. Luo Fengxue secretly told her that after Danding School was attacked, many cultivation groups would send people to support them, so the demonic beasts wouldn't dare to continue attacking, so they would be safe. Mo Chenga thought it made sense. Besides, Danding School originally had a nascent soul cultivator, and it was only breached by accident. But since the day she came out of the virtual sky world, she didn't have a chance to enter again. Luo Fengxue stayed with her all the way. Although she had a good relationship with Luo Fengxue, the virtual sky world was, after all, a heaven-defying magic weapon, so she decided not to tell anyone. Nevertheless, the next step was to hurry on with their journey, so it wasn't a waste of time. Danding School was located in the central part of West Kunwu, not far from Xianqing School. It would only take 3 to 5 days to get there from Luoyan Cliff on a core formation cultivator's flying magic weapon. Several days later, Martial Uncle Xianin led the group of foundation-building disciples to Mount Tianhua of Danding School. Mo Chenga saw a towering mountain from afar, and the volcano at the peak was emitting hot underground fire. Reportedly, the reason why Danding School was established here was precisely because this was the largest volcano in Kunwu. It must be known that in addition to concocting techniques, concocting fire was also extremely important. Aside from Dantian fire, Earth Vein fire was also an excellent concocting fire. Especially high-grade Earth Vein fire, it could almost compare to Sun Real fire and was much better than the Dantian fire of low-level cultivators. The reason why this Skyfire volcano was called the Skyfire Mountain was said to be because the Earth Vein fire here was of extremely high quality. Red flames shot out of the volcano from time to time, attracting the attention of many disciples. In the middle of the volcano, there was a huge green cauldron floating in the air. This was the symbol of the Pill Cauldron School. All the disciples of the ordinary Pill Cauldron School had this symbol on their clothes. However, from afar, they noticed that the Pill Cauldron School had suffered serious damage. The lofty mountain gate had already collapsed, and several of the houses surrounding the volcano had collapsed. The square was filled with broken bricks and broken jades. Danding School disciples dressed in black clothes were walking back and forth. There were also a lot of cultivators dressed in the clothes of other cultivation groups busying themselves. Mo Chenga looked around. Most of them were aura refining cultivators, and a few were foundation building cultivators. There wasn't even a single core formation cultivator among them. This wasn't strange at all. Aura refining disciples were the most numerous disciples and cultivation groups. If Xianqing School hadn't closed its mountain gate, they would have definitely sent aura refining disciples led by foundation building cultivators. As for core formation cultivators, there weren't many core formation cultivators in small and medium-sized cultivation groups. They weren't even strong enough to protect their own cultivation groups and clans, so why would they send them to support other cultivation groups? Only Xianqing School, which had closed its mountain gate a long time ago, could afford to send so many core formation cultivators. Before they reached Danding School's Great Mountain Protecting Formation, a flight light rose from Mount Skyfire. Soon after, the Great Mountain Protecting Formation was opened. A core formation female cultivator led several disciples to welcome the newcomer. Senior Martial Brother Xianin were honored by your presence. Master Taoist Xianin cupped his hands in greeting and said with a smile, Junior Martial Sister Mo, there's no need to be so polite. This is what I should do. The female cultivator shook her head and said with a bitter smile, everyone else is busy taking care of themselves. Only your Xianqing School sent a core formation cultivator. Senior Martial Brother Xianin, to tell you the truth, we're currently lacking high-level cultivators. We're really grateful that you came. Master Taoist Xianin still had a faint smile on his face. Our cultivation groups are friends, so we should help each other. Junior Martial Sister Mo, you don't have to do this. By the way, how's the current situation? Alas, the situation isn't good. Senior Martial Brother Xianin, please come with me. After he said that, he turned to the foundation building disciples behind him and said, take care of the martial nephews and nephews of Xianqing School. Don't neglect them. Yes, Master. The female cultivator led Master Taoist Xianin to the main hall while Mo Chenga and the other foundation building disciples were arranged to live in temporary immortals' caves by the other reception disciples. Because there were a lot of cultivators coming, Shi, Luo Fengxue, Han Qingyu, Wei Jiaxi, and the others were arranged to live together. Mo Chenga looked around the temporary immortals' caves and was very happy because there was a concocting room inside. She could use the earthly fire to enter the room, so she could practice her pill concocting skills here temporarily. In addition, this was Danding School, so there were naturally many pill recipes here. Thus, she found an opportunity to come out with Luo Fengxue. Chenga, if you want pill recipes you can ask Master. Our Xianqing School also has a lot of pill recipes. Faced with Luo Fengxue's question, Mo Chenga answered, Senior Marshal Sister Luo, once I do something, I'm single-minded. Now that I'm learning pill concocting, I really want to collect as many pill recipes as possible. Although our Shenqing school certainly has a lot of pill recipes, Danding School is a cultivation group famous for its pill concocting, so there must be something special about it. Maybe we can find something good. You're right. Although they had just gone through a disaster, the market square inside Danding School was still open as usual. Because many disciples were injured and many magic tools, spiritual talismans, and so on were lost, the market square was still very lively. Mo Chenga had already asked Danding School disciples about it, so she didn't stroll around and directly pulled Luo Fengxue into a shop. Hey, martial uncles of Shenqing School, please come in. As soon as they entered, the shop assistant greeted them enthusiastically. Probably because there had been a lot of disciples from his school coming here recently, he skillfully recognized their clothes and quickly brought them tea. Martial uncles, do you have any instructions? Mo Chenga had never been treated so warmly before she even said anything, so she felt a bit uncomfortable. Luo Fengxue, on the other hand, was very calm. She had been an elite disciple since she was a child and was also a steward. What kind of flattery hadn't she seen before? This kind of treatment was a matter of course. Seeing that Mo Chenga didn't say anything, Luo Fengxue took over the conversation. Do you have any good things here? We want to buy some in preparation for exterminating demons. Upon hearing this, the shop assistant's smile became even brighter. Martial uncles, to thank you for your assistance, the sect head issued an order a few days ago to give all shops in our school a 20% discount. We have everything you want in our shop. Magic tools, spiritual talismans, medicinal pills. As long as you need it, you can find it. Oh? There's no need for magic tools since we won't be using them for the time being. You can just give us spiritual talismans and medicinal pills. Spiritual plants are also fine, but they have to be at least 200 years old. Yes. Please wait here for a moment. After the shop assistant left, Luo Fengxue smiled and said, this is a good opportunity. Danding School has a lot of good medicinal materials that we can't usually see. 20% discount, let's buy as much as we want. With the virtual sky world, Mo Chenga didn't care about these common spiritual plants, but she still nodded with a smile. The shop assistant moved very quickly. In a short moment he came back with a cloth bag. This cloth bag was also a kind of Chengquan bag, but it had a small capacity and was extremely cheap. Shops usually used it to move goods. The shop assistant laid out the items on the table one by one and said with a smile, Martial uncles, please take a look. These are foundation building realm spiritual talismans made by our school's core formation elders. Originally, this small shop was just keeping up appearances, but now that we urgently need spiritual talismans, we took them all out. Mo Chenga picked up a talisman. Sure enough, it was a high-grade rustling falling wood talisman. There were also several world of ice and snow, sword light flickering shadow, and so on. The talismans were enshrouded in dense spiritual aura. They were made from the skin and blood of 3rd or 4th rank spiritual beasts instead of ordinary talisman paper and cinnabar. These are several special magic tools. They don't need to be refined, so maybe martial uncles will take a liking to them. The shop assistant opened a jade box. Inside were several dozens of glittering and translucent flying needles arranged neatly. Mo Chenga picked one up and saw that it was as thin as a feather. She couldn't sense any spiritual aura, but she could still feel the spiritual aura sealed on the tip of the needle. And here are the spiritual plants. Martial uncles, if you have any specific needs, please don't hesitate to tell us. The other things in Danding School's inventory might not be great, but the spiritual plants we have are among the best in the celestial pole. As they listened to the shop assistant's proud introduction, Mo Chenga and Luo Fengxue lowered their heads to examine the items. Sure enough, snow chestnut flower, purple slough grass, blue pearl jade, snow rasher mushroom. These were all relatively rare spiritual plants, and the ones on the table were all more than 200 years old. Mo Chenga and Luo Fengxue glanced at each other. Senior Martial Sister Luo, what do you think? Luo Fengxue smiled. Why don't we buy them together? In the future, whoever needs them can split them. Mo Chenga nodded, then said to the shop assistant, we want all these spiritual plants. You can calculate how many spirit stones we'll need. The shop assistant looked astonished. Even though these rare spiritual plants weren't very old, they still cost a lot of money. Moreover, there were at least 10 of them here, so no matter what, it would still cost 5,000 to 6,000 spirit stones. That many spirit stones was a huge fortune. Ordinary foundation building cultivators' annual rations were only about 1,000 spirit stones at most. However, he quickly regained his composure. After a simple count, he answered, "Martial uncles, there are a total of 5,760 spirit stones here. After a 20% discount, it'll be 4,608 spirit stones. Let's just erase the number and count it as 4,600 spirit stones." "Alright, you can pack them up," Luo Fengxue instructed him. She then asked Emo Chenga, "I only want these spiritual plants. What else do you want?" Emo Chenga muttered to herself for a while, then pointed at the flying needle-like magic tool. When she fought for foundation-building pills in Yunwu sect, she once obtained a handful of flying needles from Murongzi. However, the more she used them, the fewer they became. Moreover, she was already in the foundation-building realm, so they were no longer of much use. These things were indeed good for sneak attacks. Keeping some of them on her could be used in case of emergencies. By the way, Emo Chenga said after the shop assistant packed up all the things and collected the spirit stones from Luo Fengxue, pretending to ask casually, "This is Danding School's shop. Are there any good pill recipes for sale?" The shop assistant immediately answered, "Of course. Our Danding School is most outstanding in pill concocting. We have both ordinary pill recipes and some rare pill recipes. However, it depends on what kind of pill recipes Martial Uncle wants. We can't sell some special pill recipes. The sect's core formation grandmasters have to make the decision." As the #1 pill concocting group, Danding School naturally had some unique skills that outsiders didn't have. Emo Chenga wasn't surprised by his answer and asked, "What about ancient pill recipes?" "Ancient pill recipes?" The shop assistant was startled and asked, "Martial Uncle, why do you want ancient pill recipes?" Many of the spiritual plants in ancient pill recipes have been lost, so they naturally lost their value. Emo Chenga had long thought of an excuse, so she simply said faintly, "I've done some research on the Tao of pill concocting. Some ancient medicinal pills have excellent medicinal properties, so I want to use ordinary medicinal plants as replacements to see if I can refine them into medicinal pills." "Oh, so Martial Uncle is also a kindred spirit." A smile blossomed on the shop assistant's face. His attitude towards Emo Chenga became a bit more cordial. He said, "This isn't a big deal. Our school is also studying it. Pill recipes can also be sold to outsiders, but the price is slightly higher." Emo Chenga said, "This isn't a big deal. If they're good, just bring them to me." Chapter 119. He received several pill formulas from Danding School. There was a spirit-gathering pill suitable for foundation-building cultivators, a clear sky pill suitable for core formation cultivators, an aura-stabilizing pill, a look-preserving pill, and even a longevity pill. The effects of the essence-gathering pill seemed ordinary. It was just a common pill for foundation establishment cultivators to take to increase their cultivation, but in reality, the effects of the ancient pill recipe couldn't be compared to the essence-enhancing pill of today. The same principle applied to the Azure Cloud pill. As for aura-stabilizing pills, look-preserving pills, and longevity pills, aura-stabilizing pills were good medicine for adjusting spiritual aura and were most suitable for people who had just experienced spiritual aura deviation. Although Emo Chenga wouldn't be in danger of experiencing spiritual aura deviation in the future, it was still extremely useful when she made a realm breakthrough. As for the looking-preserving pill and the longevity pill, although they had the same names and effects, their medicinal effects were different. The current looking-preserving pill could only preserve one's appearance for 10 years, while the looking-preserving pill could preserve one's youth forever. The longevity pill was the same. It didn't extend one's lifespan by 100 years, but rather by 500 years. Forget about the other medicinal pills, this longevity pill's medicinal effects were too shocking. It could increase a core formation cultivator's lifespan by 500 years. It was enough for a core formation cultivator to advance from the core formation stage to the nascent soul stage. Perhaps it could even allow a nascent soul cultivator to reach the soul formation stage. Now, even the immortality elixir with a 100-year medicinal effect was something that only nascent soul cultivators could obtain. She sighed inwardly. If Second Uncle had known that she had a rare treasure when he was still alive, how could he have let Second Uncle die with hatred? Moreover, ever since she obtained the virtual sky world, it was as if the hundreds of thousands of years of time the virtual sky world had experienced flowed into her memory in an instant. She clearly remembered every kind of spiritual plant inside, so when she chose pill recipes, she chose all kinds of spiritual plants. Luo Fengxue didn't know about this. She only knew Emo Chenga spent a lot of money to buy useless pill recipes, so she kept muttering about it on the way back. However, she had been a disciple of a famous school since she was a child and her master was fond of her. Her family was even richer than Emo Chenga's, so she didn't think a few thousand spirit stones was a big deal. She grumbled for a while, but seeing that Mo Chenga didn't care, she no longer said anything. Right after the two of them entered the temporary immortal's cave, they saw Han Qingyu and Wei Jiaxi sitting together in the living room. They seemed to be waiting for them. Upon seeing them, Han Qingyu said happily, "You're finally back. Hurry up, we're about to set off." "What?" Luo Fengxue asked in confusion. "Eldest martial sister, where are we going?" Han Qingyu said, "We didn't come to danding school to play around. After resting for a few days, it's time for us to go kill monsters." Oh, that was true. Currently, many of danding school's disciples had died. If they, as reinforcements, just sat there and played, it wouldn't be right. The few of them did not have anything to prepare. They were not mortals. All of their belongings were kept in their cosmos sacks. They could just leave. 15 minutes later, under Han Qingyu's lead, the four of them left Mount Heaven Volcano. While they were shopping, Master Daoist Shenin assigned them a task. He told Han Qingyu and Wei Jiaxi to wait for them to come back before they set off. On the way, Han Qingyu briefly explained their mission. As it turned out, there were low-ranked demonic beasts roaming in the vicinity of their clan's territory. Their clan couldn't hold on any longer, so they were asked to go and provide reinforcements. The four of them were foundation-building cultivators, so they could already be considered high-level cultivators in Danding School. Although Danding School was one of the 7 great cultivation groups, it couldn't compare to Tiandao Sect or Shenqing School. They were good at pill concocting, but their cultivation levels were relatively ordinary. The number of people in their school was only slightly more than that of medium-sized cultivation groups. Now that they had suffered disastrous losses, they couldn't provide more foundation-building cultivators. However, demonic beasts were mostly in the 1st or 2nd rank. Demonic beasts in the 4th rank and above were rarely seen. Therefore, the four of them, together with the cultivators from their clans, weren't in too much danger. Half a day later, they finally arrived at the branch of Mount Heaven Volcano. The four of them watched from afar as a group of patrolling cultivators flew towards them. This group of patrolling cultivators was also composed of aura-refining cultivators and was led by a foundation-building cultivator. The foundation-building cultivator leading the group was only in the early stage of the foundation-building realm. His hair was half white and he looked like an old man. Obviously, he didn't have much time left in his life. In cultivation clans that relied on cultivation groups, the young and talented cultivators would usually stay in their groups. Only those who didn't have much time left in their lives and had no hope of making a realm breakthrough would return to their clans to train their descendants. As the cultivator flew closer, he looked at them cautiously. After carefully sizing them up, he cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoists, may I ask who you are?" Han Qingyu showed a faint smile and took out an identity tablet. "Fellow Taoists, we're disciples of Shenqing School. We were ordered to assist Danding School, so we've come to assist you." The old man took the identity tablet. After verifying it, his expression changed from cautiousness to pleasant surprise. He approached them and bowed repeatedly. "Fellow Taoists from Shenqing School, this matter is of great importance. I'm really sorry for offending you just now. I'm a cultivator from Yu clan. I'll report to the clan head and come to welcome you. Please wait here for a moment." Han Qingyu made an inviting gesture. The cultivator then took out a summoning talisman and whispered a few words. The summoning talisman then turned into a beam of light and flew towards the house below. As the summoning talisman disappeared, several flight lights immediately rose from below. When they came closer, Mo Chenga could clearly see that they were a middle-aged cultivator, a beautiful young woman, and an old man. The middle-aged cultivator's cultivation level was the highest among them. He was in the middle stage of the foundation-building realm. He had long hair and a black beard. He was dressed in a Cosmos Taoist robe and looked very dignified. Both the young woman and the old man were in the early stage of the foundation-building realm. The young woman was gentle and demure while the old man looked ordinary. As soon as the three of them came closer, the middle-aged cultivator smiled and said from afar, "Fairies, we're honored by your presence. I didn't go out to welcome you, please don't take offense." Fairies? Mo Chenga felt a bit dizzy when she heard this form of address. She knew female cultivators were sometimes called fairies, but in general mortals called them that. The path to immortality had nothing to do with men and women, so they still addressed each other as fellow Taoists. This middle-aged cultivator called them fairies as soon as they met to show his respect. However, Mo Chenga really wasn't used to it. Han Qingyu remained calm and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist, please don't be so polite. We're both cultivators, so you can just call us fellow Taoist." Seeing that she was behaving appropriately, the middle-aged cultivator knew they weren't proud and arrogant female cultivators, so he also smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, you're right. I'll do as you say. Oh, I'm Yu Jingfeng, the clan head of Yu clan. This is my wife and this is my clan brother, Haitao." The cultivator pointed at the two people next to him. The young woman and the old man saluted him together. After they finished saluting him, he asked with a smile, "May I know fellow Taoists' names?" Mo Chinga and the others returned the salute before Han Qingyu answered, "I'm Han Qingyu from Shenqing School. These are my junior martial sisters, Wei Jiasi, Luo Fengxue and Mo Chinga. So it's fellow Taoist Han, fellow Taoist Wei, fellow Taoist Luo, and fellow Taoist Mo. Fellow Taoists, you're all so young, but your cultivation levels are already high. You're truly admirable." Han Qingyu smiled gracefully and said, "Clan head Yu, please don't be so polite. Among us martial sisters, my two junior martial sisters are worthy of this praise. Junior martial sister Wei and I, on the other hand, are already over 100 years old, so we're nothing." Most female cultivators used cultivation techniques to preserve their youthful looks. Even if they didn't, they would still take look-preserving pills. Because of this, both Han Qingyu and Wei Jiasi looked like they were in their early 20s. Furthermore, one of them was in the middle stage of the foundation building realm while the other was in the late stage of the foundation building realm. Based on their lifespans, they looked to be in their 30s at most. Han Qingyu's words were actually quite modest. Clan head Yu was a quick-witted person. Once he heard Han Qingyu's words, he immediately waved his hand and said, "Hey, fellow Taoist Han is too polite. Even if you and fellow Taoist Wei are already over 100 years old, your future prospects are still boundless. Fellow Taoist Han is already in the late stage of the foundation building realm, and he's also the descendant of a famous cultivation group. Maybe one day he'll form his gold core. He'll truly be a talented young man." "I wouldn't dare." Between the two of them, one was praising her while the other was being modest, making Mo Chinga feel very gloomy. Senior martial sister Han really had this much patience. If it were her, although she would also say a few polite words, she would definitely end the topic early. After talking for a quarter of an hour, the patrolling foundation building cultivator had already gone back to his patrol. Before the two of them could finish talking, fortunately Madame Yu, who was standing next to Clan Head Yu, saw an opportunity and interrupted their conversation. She said reproachfully, "Husband, fellow Taoists have just arrived. Why don't you invite them inside to sit first?" Clan Head Yu suddenly understood and said with a remorseful expression, "You're right. I was too forgetful. Fortunately, Madame reminded me. Fellow Taoists, I'm sorry. Please come inside and take a seat." Han Qingyu smiled. With Clan Head Yu leading the way, the group of people landed in Yu Clan's courtyard. Clan Head Yu welcomed the four of them into the main hall. They sat down according to the order of the host and guests and ordered them to serve tea before they finally got down to business. "To be honest, fellow Taoists, my Yu Clan's current situation isn't very good. You're all disciples of famous sects, so you should be able to see that my Yu Clan's defensive formation can't be considered top-notch. Moreover, we only have 4 foundation building cultivators. We're from a small sect and our magic tools and medicinal pills aren't good either. When the demonic beasts attacked last time, my clan elder brother was injured. My wife and I also destroyed our magic tools, so we had no choice but to ask the sect for help. Fortunately, you came in time." Han Qingyu didn't act modest this time. She pondered for a moment then asked, "Clan Head Yu, how's your current fighting strength? Fellow Taoist Haitao is injured, so let's not count for now. Do you and Madame Yu still have any means to defend against the enemy?" Clan Head Yu nodded. He stroked his beard and muttered to himself for a moment before answering, "Although Madame and I destroyed our magic tools, we still have other means. Now we won't have any problems fighting demonic beasts of the same rank. My clan elder brother is old and injured, so he probably can't join the battle right away. Also, the one outside is my nephew. Although his cultivation level is lower than mine, he's very powerful in fights of magical power. His odds of winning against a demonic beast of a higher rank are slightly higher." "Is that so?" Han Qingyu originally didn't have much hope for Yu Clan, so she wasn't disappointed. Now she shifted her gaze towards the 3 of them and asked, "What do you think?" Among the 3 of them, Wei Jiasi was the oldest, so she spoke first. "Eldest martial sister, I don't think there's any problem. You and I can fight one against many. Fengxue and Tiange also have some means, so we won't have to worry about our safety in fights of magical power against demonic beasts of the same rank." Luo Fengxue said, "Eldest martial sister, we can rearrange Yu Clan's cultivators. Maybe the aura refining cultivators can also play a big role. Mo Chinga pondered for a long time before she finally said, I can rearrange Yu Clan's defensive formation. It should be able to increase its defensive power by half, as well as several means of attack. Han Qingyu nodded with a smile. This was also what she had thought of. Wei Jiaxi had always focused on fights of magical power, Luo Fengxue was good at management, and Mo Chinga was good at formations. The three of them all focused on different things. As for herself, she had always been the eldest martial sister, but she was good at leading people and making the final decision. The four of them had different characters, but they complemented each other, so Master Daoist Xianyin sent them out together. The three people from Yu Clan were pleasantly surprised to hear this. If that was the case, their arrival wouldn't just give Yu Clan 4 more foundation-building cultivators. Yu Clan could be saved now. Chapter 120. When they arrived at Yu Clan, the four of them were finally given separate rooms. Right now they had no time to study pill concocting or cultivate, so Mo Chinga entered the virtual sky world. She only stayed for a moment and took out some books. Because she got the memories of the virtual sky world, Mo Chinga finally understood why she could enter the virtual sky world so easily. This virtual sky world must have been lost in the world. Many people must have tried to make it recognize them by blood, but only she succeeded. It was probably because of her spiritual roots of the origin. The virtual sky world was a thing from the distant past. The cultivation techniques of the distant past era were very different from those of the present era. Even though spiritual roots of the origin only appeared every few thousand years, everyone practiced the art of the origin. Therefore, people with spiritual power all had primal chaos inside their bodies. The virtual sky world was created at that time, and its principles were also similar to primal chaos. However, the art of the origin was lost, so people of the present era couldn't awaken the virtual sky world even if they dripped their blood on it. Mo Chinga guessed that in addition to Zhong Muling, there was another deification cultivator who had a virtual sky world. He must have used some special method to create primal chaos to make the virtual sky world recognize him as its master. There were traces left by the previous owner of the virtual sky world. Mo Chinga didn't know who that owner was. There were a lot of books, but unfortunately he didn't leave any magic weapons. Presumably he carried those things with him and lost them when he died. However, that person must have been a person with great divine power. Mo Chinga found a notebook that recorded some of that person's reflections on cultivation, but she couldn't understand it at all. She knew it must be because her realm was too low. According to Yuan Bao, the great divine power of the distant past era wasn't something ordinary nascent soul cultivators could do. It was a realm above the deification realm they didn't know, because Zhong Muling's virtual sky world also had these miscellaneous things, which they couldn't understand with their realm. However, there were some simple books that shocked her. The art of alchemy, the art of talisman crafting, the art of crafting, the art of crafting, the art of setting up arrays, and even the art of mechanisms. Because she had the deepest understanding of arrays, she started learning the art of setting up arrays as soon as she could. There was a kind of illusory sky formation recorded in the book, which should be the formation Zhong Muling arranged outside his virtual sky world. The book described this formation as the formation of 10,000 images. With a single thought, 10,000 images would appear. The illusory formations Mo Chinga experienced were only two of the weakest ones. However, that was all she could understand. Her cultivation level also affected her ability to understand Tao, and Tao was divided into Yin and Yang and the 5 elements, which was the foundation of the formation. If her cultivation level was not high enough, she would not be able to go further. Even without the illusory sky formation, there were some simple formations recorded in it that were not something that could be compared to today's formations. The Yu Clan's defensive formation was called the 4 Symbols Formation. Although it wasn't an ordinary formation, it wasn't a profound one either. Generally, only a few mid-level cultivation clans would use it. From these books, Mo Chinga also found the 4 Symbols Formation. However, the arrangement method was somewhat different from the one she used today, and its power was also much greater. In addition, there was also a kind of 4 Symbols 100 Flowers Formation, which was a variation of the 4 Symbols Formation. It was based on the 4 Symbols Formation and combined with the arrangement method of another formation called the Waxing and Waning Formation, making it a kind of compound formation. At one moment there were 4 symbols and at the other moment there were hundreds of flowers. The two formations were completely unrelated, but they combined into one. It was basically impossible to break the formation with a single method. When Mo Chinga saw this kind of formation arrangement method, she was amazed by its master. The theory was really simple and could be understood with just a hint. However, before this she never had this kind of idea. When demonic beasts cultivated to a high level, they would also develop intelligence. But third and fourth ranked demonic beasts still couldn't understand human speech. Their bodies were tyrannical and they didn't have spiritual roots. Compared to human cultivators, their spiritual power was pure, so they had an advantage in fights of magical power. However, the external objects created by human cultivators relying on their intelligence were often superior to them, such as magic weapons, talismans, formations, and so on. Among these things, formations were the cheapest and most effective. After Mo Chenga said she wanted to rearrange Yu Clan's formation, the patriarch of Yu Clan, who was a smart person, was very enthusiastic towards her and even sent many cultivators to help her. However, Mo Chenga drove all those people back. It wasn't that she was afraid of leaking the secret, but rather that these aura-refining cultivators would only be a hindrance to her. It was better for her to arrange the formation herself. Aside from formation discs, formation flags, and spirit stones, there were also some specific spiritual beasts, spiritual plants, or spiritual objects. The reason why Mo Chenga directly chose to modify the four symbols formation was because this was the original formation, so it was convenient to modify it. The second reason was because the materials needed for this formation were simple. Only a kind of spiritual wood, which could be found in the virtual sky world. Mo Chenga spent a whole day to thoroughly understand the four symbols formation. After that, she spent only an hour to finish laying the formation. She then easily finished her work. Reportedly, Yu Clan had 2 young cultivators in Danding school. Patriarch Yu actually ate a look-preserving pill, which was why he was so young. As for Madame Yu, she wasn't young anymore. Among the 4 of them, the youngest only had a lifespan of 100 years. None of them had advanced to the late stage, so they simply came back to wholeheartedly cultivate their descendants. Although the cultivation levels of these 4 people were ordinary, they had good foresight. Yu Clan's cultivators also had a good foundation. Unfortunately, they obviously couldn't compare to Shenqing School's elite disciples. They couldn't even compare to the ordinary disciples of Clear Spring Peak, which made Luo Fengxue both angry and anxious. Mo Chenga sat leisurely on the side, reading a formation book while watching Luo Fengxue angrily scolding the Yu Clan disciples. "Hey you! Do you know how to use talismans?" "Senior, I am only in the first layer of the aura refining realm." "You're still a cultivator in the first layer of the aura refining realm. You're a cultivator, but you actually don't know how to use talismans. How shameful. Go to the side and watch me." Thus, she made a pose to draw talisman paper and demonstrated in a very natural and unrestrained manner. "Do you know how?" That boy, who was only 14 or 15 years old, stared at Luo Fengxue in fear. Luo Fengxue was enraged by his stare. "You still don't know how?" "Senior," the boy cried, "I'll slowly learn. Don't tell me to move things, I'll be laughed at." Moving things was a mortal's job. In the past 2 days, Luo Fengxue had reorganized all the people in Yu Clan. The mortals did chores while the cultivators practiced several kinds of simple formations and some fighting techniques. Luo Fengxue was used to doing these things, so her movements were extremely fast. It only took her 1 day to have everyone return to their respective positions. When the child cried, Luo Fengxue's anger was somewhat suppressed. She had always been popular in the school. In addition to her high status, she also had a good character. Even if ordinary disciples needed her help, she would help them if she could. Therefore, when she saw this child looking at her pitifully, her heart softened. "You come here." Luo Fengxue called a cultivator in the 3rd layer of the aura refining realm who was already in his 30s. She then pointed at the boy and said, "Teach him how to use talismans." That cultivator obediently walked towards her. He was also trembling with fear and cautiously answered, "Yes." Thus, like this, the older cultivator explained in detail how to use talismans bit by bit while Luo Fengxue added a few more sentences. An hour later, the boy cried out, "Senior, please let me move the things." Luo Fengxue couldn't breathe. She was so angry that she almost blacked out. At that moment, Mo Chenga couldn't bear it anymore. She covered her mouth and giggled. Luo Fengxue heard the muffled laughter. She turned around with a murderous look, but when she saw it was Mo Chenga, she immediately froze. After ordering the more outstanding aura refining cultivators to continue teaching, Luo Fengxue weakly sat next to her. Mo Chenga stopped laughing and earnestly comforted her. "That's enough. These cultivators don't even have the qualifications to enter the school, so it's obvious what kind of talents they are. You're asking too much of them by using the standards of our school's disciples." Luo Fengxue shouted, "Ask them? I'm not asking them at all, okay? Not to mention the elite disciples. Even if ordinary disciples of Shenqing school were to line up in a formation and use their own methods, it wouldn't be a problem for several aura-refining disciples to fight against a second-ranked demonic beast. But look at them, what did I ask for? I asked them to stand in their positions and use whatever they should use, but they actually don't even know how to use talismans. She paused for a moment, then turned around angrily. Tell me, have you ever heard of a cultivator who doesn't even know how to use talismans? They don't need any techniques. Emo Chenga sighed. I've seen them. Luo Fengxue originally wanted to express her anger, but once she heard Emo Chenga's serious answer, she was stunned. There really are? Emo Chenga nodded and said, in the past I wandered the world with second uncle. What haven't we seen? Cultivation clans are getting worse and worse with each generation. There are many examples. Some clans' children not only have mixed spiritual roots, but they're also very weak. Even if we let them cultivate, it's still better than nothing. Some people are trapped in the first layer of the aura-refining realm their whole lives, and some people's intelligence is the same as ordinary people's or even worse. That's how our Yi clan declined. Luo Fengxue was speechless. She was found by Master Taoist Xianyin from the secular world. Because her spiritual roots were excellent, she was directly taken to Mount Taikang and accepted as an inner disciple, so she didn't know much about cultivation clans. Forget it, just do whatever you want. When the time comes, it'll be fine as long as they can deal with first-ranked demonic beasts. We'll take care of the rest. You don't need to worry too much. Senior Martial Sister Han will make arrangements. In the end, won't they still have to rely on us? It's already not bad if these aura-refining cultivators can protect themselves. I just hope we don't have to be distracted to protect them, but they're like this. Alright, I admit I can't play a role in this matter. Emo Chenga smiled. Luo Fengxue's dejected appearance was really rare. Didn't you already understand this? Everyone has their own strengths and weaknesses. Fighting and brawling aren't your strong points. You'd better leave these things to them and make preparations on your own. And you're right. Luo Fengxue pondered for a moment, then cast aside her unhappy mood. Right, do you still have a lot of talismans? I've already used up most of them. Eldest Martial Sister gave me some, but it's still not enough. Emo Chenga knew Luo Fengxue didn't have enough time to sacrifice and refine magic tools, so she needed talismans more than the others. She made a rough inventory in her mind, then took out a stack of talismans. I have a lot here. These were given to me by Martial Uncle. There's also this. Upon seeing the talismans Emo Chenga took out, Luo Fengxue cheered. The two of them began to divide the talismans among themselves. Oh, Chenga, these talismans are so strange. They don't seem to be made by Master, and they look very powerful. They couldn't have been bought outside, right? Where did they come from? Emo Chenga took a look. They came from the Chengquan bag Zhong Yuling gave her. Talismans made by deification cultivators, even if they deliberately lowered their realm requirements, still weren't simple goods. Is it inconvenient to say? No, Emo Chenga said, they were given to me by Martial Uncle Shoujing. Luo Fengxue, who was looking through the talismans, was startled. She raised her head and stared at Emo Chenga blankly. Emo Chenga's expression was the same as usual, but there was a hint of obscurity in her gaze. Chapter 121. Emo Chenga stood on top of the mountain peak, staring at the dense forest below the cliff with a slight frown on her face. Things were a little troublesome. When they came that day, the Yu clan said that there was a group of demonic beasts in the vicinity and that they had fought with them a few days ago. At that time, the demonic beasts had almost destroyed the Yu clan's defensive formation, and it was estimated that they would return in a few days. From then on, she and Luo Fengxue stayed in Yu clan to prepare for the upcoming battle. As for Han Qingyu and Wei Jiaxi, their two senior martial sisters, they kept in touch with Yu clan to investigate the demonic beast situation. The movements of these monster beasts were exactly as the Yu clan had said. They seemed to be monitoring them, but they also seemed to be neither close nor distant. Sometimes it seemed as if they were about to attack, and sometimes it seemed as if they were about to retreat. There were too many mortals and low-level cultivators in Yu clan. Han Qingyu thought it would be better if they didn't take the initiative to attack. Otherwise, the ones who attacked would have to fight alone, and the ones who stayed behind wouldn't have enough strength and would fall into the enemy's scheme. Wei Jiaxi actually didn't think a low-ranked demonic beast could have such intelligence, but Han Qingyu said it was better to be safe than sorry. They had come to battle to protect the Yu family. It would be better if they could kill the demonic beasts, but the safety of the Yu family was more important. However, in the following days these demonic beasts did not attack again. Mo Chinga had already modified Yu Clan's defensive formation, so she didn't think demonic beasts would be able to enter. However, the problem now was that demonic beasts were eyeing them covetously from the side and they couldn't solve the problem. This feeling was too unbearable. Moreover, they were ordered to assist, so how could they be delayed here? Today was her turn to patrol. Now that she was standing on the mountain peak, she discovered the aura of demonic beasts. The aura wasn't very strong, but it was very dense and it was extremely close. She hesitated for a moment before taking out the summoning talisman and saying a few words. With a wave of her hand, the summoning talisman flew towards the Yu family's courtyard. Before long, a flight light rose from the Yu clan. Wei Jiaxi rode her flying sword and approached them. She asked faintly, "What's the matter?" Wei Jiaxi's attitude towards her couldn't be considered good, but Mo Chinga was already used to it. Mo Chinga also didn't think it was necessary for her to improve her relationship with Wei Jiaxi, so she said faintly, "Senior Martial Sister Wei, look over there." It appeared again. Wei Jiaxi turned around and stared for a while before she closed her eyes and released her divine sense. After a long time, she opened her eyes with a solemn expression. "Senior Sister Wei, what should we do?" According to Mo Chinga's divine sense, there were at least 5 or 6 second-ranked demonic beasts in that area. Wei Jiaxi wrinkled her brows and said, "Let's go take a look." Before she could get down from the flying sword, she immediately transformed into a flight light and flew towards the area filled with monster aura. Upon seeing this, Mo Chinga helplessly shook her head. She summoned a white silk handkerchief, then stepped onto it and followed closely behind Mo Chinga. He descended the mountain and flew into the forest. This white silk handkerchief was a gift from Zhong Muling. It was both a defensive magic weapon and a flying magic weapon. She still hadn't tested its defense function, but its flying ability was outstanding. It didn't require much spiritual aura, and it was fast and stable. With her experience, if she tried to escape, perhaps only a few foundation-building cultivators would be able to catch up to her. Besides, it's been some time since she built her foundation. Especially after the battle, she'd already taken some time to refine all those magic weapons and magic tools. Among them was the land-fleeing ruler. Even Zhong Muling praised it for its ingenuity. Even if she ran into something, she wouldn't be in any danger as long as she traveled 1,000 miles. However, Wei Jiaxi's expression was very unsightly at the moment. Her flying magic tool was just a flying sword. Although it was given to her by her master and was much better than ordinary flying swords, there was nothing special about it. After entering the forest, due to the terrain and environment, her flying speed was greatly reduced. Nevertheless, Mo Chinga was steady and extremely agile from beginning to end. She had been in the foundation-building realm for more than 80 years. Although she was still in the middle stage of the foundation-building realm, her understanding of spiritual aura cultivation techniques wasn't something ordinary cultivators could compare to. Now she was actually outclassed by Mo Chinga. Although it was because of magic tools, she still felt bad. Once they entered the jungle, it was already the territory of the demonic beasts. In the past there were only rank 1 demonic beasts, but now there would occasionally be rank 2 and 3 demonic beasts appearing. But along the way they didn't even see a single low-level demonic beast. "Hey, Senior Martial Sister Wei." Mo Chinga suddenly stopped and called out. At this moment Wei Jiaxi was a little angry. She shouted angrily, "What are you doing?" "The demonic aura has disappeared." Wei Jiaxi was stunned. He hurriedly sent out his divine sense, and sure enough that was the case. Because Mo Chinga was the one who reminded her about this kind of thing because of her desire to compare herself with Mo Chinga, she felt even more humiliated and annoyed. "Even if it's gone, we should go to that place and see what's going on." Mo Chinga shook her head inwardly when she heard Wei Jiaxi's harsh words. She then followed behind Wei Jiaxi and continued to walk towards their original destination. She already learned from Luo Fengxue why Wei Jiaxi hated her, but she didn't think she was wrong. In fact, when she thought about it carefully, she was actually quite disappointed in Wei Jiaxi. Senior Martial Sister Wei was so entangled in her emotions, yet she couldn't tell the reason. Even if Luo Fengxue managed to persuade her, it would most likely be very difficult for her to have any achievements in the future. This was the flaw in her character. After letting his imagination run wild for a while, the two arrived at their destination. As she slowly followed behind Wei Jiaxi, Mo Chinga secretly took out the shuttle of flying Apsara and got off the white silk handkerchief. She held it in her hand and lightly stepped on the withered branches to move forward. Suddenly she took a wrong step, her body floated up slightly and rolled to the side. At the same time, Wei Jiasi turned around and leaped high into the air. A bolt of lightning exploded where they were. Mo Chenga and Wei Jiasi glanced at each other and saw the astonishment in each other's eyes. Someone who could hide their breath and had such a powerful spell that they couldn't find the location of the person who cast the spell? This opponent wasn't simple. She didn't seem like an ordinary second or third-rank demonic beast. The two of them cautiously stood behind each other and took out their magic tools. Mo Chenga's white silk handkerchief and shuttle of flying apsara, one for defense and the other for offense. Wei Jiasi took out several talismans and a small silver ring. Her water spirit flag was already destroyed, but she was still Master Daoist Xuanin's advanced inner disciple, so how could she be shabby? This Rui ring was also a powerful magic tool. The two of them used their divine senses to observe their surroundings. After an unknown amount of time, they suddenly made their moves at the same time. Wei Jiasi threw the Rui ring, which collided with a bolt of lightning. As for Mo Chenga, she threw the white silk handkerchief. The handkerchief immediately changed shape in midair, turning into bricks and stones which fell down with a plop, plop, plop sound. They formed a wall in front of her, blocking the lightning. The difference was that while Wei Jiasi was forced back a step, Mo Chenga didn't budge an inch. Wei Jiasi cast another glance at Mo Chenga. Her eyes were filled with astonishment. She could naturally see that Mo Chenga had both magic tools and magic weapons. Magic tools were fine since magic weapons were naturally better than hers, but she didn't expect them to be this powerful. Based on her estimation, that bolt of lightning just now was much more powerful than a foundation-building spell. Therefore, although she was strong, she was still forced back a step. Mo Chenga, on the other hand, was unexpectedly so relaxed. A few days ago, Mo Chenga, who had just entered the early stage of the foundation-building realm, returned after disappearing for several days. But now, she, who had just entered the early stage of the foundation-building realm, suddenly advanced to the middle stage of the foundation-building realm. This naturally aroused the suspicions of her acquaintances. However, their masters also explicitly ordered them not to inquire about this matter, so no one asked too much. Nevertheless, everyone knew that Mo Chenga must have encountered some kind of fated chance. This matter urged Wei Jiasi to cultivate even more diligently. However, although she had a deep understanding of fights of magical powers, she didn't expect that not only did Mo Chenga's cultivation level advance, but she was also stronger than her in fights of magical powers. Chapter 122. Mo Chenga didn't have time to care about Wei Jiasi's thoughts. She already had a vague idea where the lightning came from. She stretched out her right hand and the white silk handkerchief, which had turned into a brick wall, returned to her hand. She seemed to be attentively observing her surroundings, but the shuttle of flying apsara in her other hand had already been quietly launched. The golden light flashed and disappeared. All of a sudden, Wei Jiasi heard a rumbling sound. She immediately turned around and saw Mo Chenga sneering as she retrieved the shuttle of flying apsara. Mo Chenga said contemptuously, "You actually dared to show off this kind of low-grade formation in front of me?" Before Wei Jiasi could say anything, the shuttle of flying apsara was launched. In the blink of an eye, several places were broken one after another. Soon after, there was a lightning bolt that seemed to carry great anger and an astonishing momentum. Mo Chenga shook her hand and launched the white silk handkerchief again. Wei Jiasi also turned sideways and launched her talisman and magic tool at the same time. One defended while the other attacked. A rumbling sound was the sound of the formation breaking. Mo Chenga and Wei Jiasi glanced at each other when they saw what was inside the formation. Both of them saw the disbelief in each other's eyes. They indeed found the enemies, but the enemies were actually only two demonic beasts. These two demonic beasts were both in the shape of wolves. One was carrying the other on its back. The one standing on the ground was a fourth-ranked demonic beast with a fierce gaze. The one lying on its back had short forelegs and couldn't walk, but it had a cunning gaze. The two wolves and the two humans confronted each other. Then Mo Chenga heard Wei Jiasi whisper, "These are the two bedraggled demons." Mo Chenga was shocked. Two bedraggled demons referred to two demonic beasts that could act together. There was a saying in the secular world called, "Wolves collude to commit evil." It referred to two kinds of wild beasts, wolves and bedraggled, cooperating to do bad things. These two bedraggled demons were also a wolf and a bedraggled demon, but they were already demonic beasts. Mo Chenga suddenly understood. Other demonic beasts might need to be in the 8th rank or above to have the wisdom to use formations. However, demonic beasts like the bedraggled demon were born with intelligence. It relied on its wolf strength while Mo Chenga provided its brain. The two demonic beasts relied on each other to hunt for food and cultivate. Among these two demonic beasts, the wolf was in the 4th rank while the bedraggled demon was only in the 2nd rank. However, this bedraggled demon could actually use a formation. Although it was an extremely simple spirit-concealing formation, it was still something that could only be done by demonic beasts that reached the 8th rank. Then, these days of misdirection were also the work of these two beasts? Given their strength, they shouldn't have provoked them like this. Enchanting and Wei Jiasi didn't have much time to think. The wolf monster in front of them suddenly leaped up, and both Enchanting and Wei Jiasi took out their magic tools. The shuttle of flying Apsara turned into a streak of golden light. The Rui ring shone with a cold silver light. In an instant they collided with the lightning. Golden light, silver light, and lightning light intertwined, emitting a blinding light that almost blinded people. This wolf monster's cultivation level was in the 4th rank, which was equivalent to the late stage of the foundation building realm. Both Enchanting and Wei Jiasi were in the middle stage of the foundation building realm, and they also had outstanding magic tools, so their chances of winning weren't small. At that moment, Wei Jiasi raised her wrist and took out a talisman. The demonic wolf glared at her fiercely, then leaped away with a hunched back. The golden and silver light suddenly flourished, and the lightning was suppressed until it finally disappeared. Enchanting heaved a sigh of relief. Although the wolf monster wasn't a threat, the wolf monster's strength wasn't bad. At that moment, the bay let out several soft cries. Obviously, it was trying to tell the wolf something. However, Enchanting and Wei Jiasi couldn't understand what it was saying, so they could only be vigilant. Senior Martial Sister Wei? Wei Jiasi's gaze changed. In the end, she made up her mind and said, "Strike first and gain the upper hand." Enchanting understood what Wei Jiasi meant. She shook her arm and took out the white silk handkerchief. At the same time, Wei Jiasi also took out several magic tools and talismans. Together with Enchanting's shuttle of flying Apsara, they all flew towards the two hunched beasts. In a hurry, the wolf monster howled and opened its mouth, shooting out several lightning bolts. By the time the spiritual aura fluctuation stabilized, the two beasts had already fallen to the ground. Enchanting patted the dust off her body and walked towards the two beasts' corpses. "Oh." Wei Jiasi, who was slightly injured, asked, "What's wrong?" Enchanting turned over the two corpses and said, "Turns out they were injured. No wonder these two beasts deliberately laid a misleading formation here. They must have been left here by those demonic beasts, so they wanted to create the illusion that there were many demonic beasts here so they could secretly heal their injuries." Wei Jiasi examined her own injuries and said, "Look around. This wolf monster isn't like other demonic beasts. Since it can use formations, maybe it has some kind of treasure." Sure enough, Enchanting found several pieces of wood-like objects. These things were also the tools the wolf monster used to lay the formation. She didn't know what they were, but they could actually replace formation discs and formation flags. There were also several crystalline minerals and spiritual plants. There was also a palm-sized, thin piece of jade. It was sparkling and translucent like a mirror. Enchanting didn't know what it was, but when she put it upright, it reflected a shadow. Moreover, the shadow seemed to be alive. "Senior Martial Sister Wei, take a look." Enchanting took the things back and handed them to Wei Jiasi. Wei Jiasi had lived nearly 100 years longer than Enchanting, so her knowledge was naturally far greater than Enchanting's. She took the things, examined them and said, "This is 7 phoenix wood, this is moon jade stone, and these spiritual plants are used to heal injuries. As for this." She lifted the jade and said doubtfully, "I can't recognize it." Oh. There were many spiritual objects in this world, who could possibly recognize all of them? Enchanting thought for a moment, then said, "Senior Martial Sister Wei, this 7 phoenix wood can be used to lay a formation. Can you give it to me? I don't want anything else." According to the names Wei Jiasi mentioned, the other ores and spiritual plants were quite valuable. Although this 7 phoenix wood was rare, it was useless for people who couldn't lay formations. Wei Jiasi didn't refuse. She nodded and said, "Since you want it, I'll give it to you." Enchanting was overjoyed and took it. "As for this thing?" Wei Jiasi lifted the thin piece of jade and said with a frown, "It doesn't look like an ordinary thing. Let's take it back and let my master identify it." Just as the two of them were about to stand up, the jade suddenly flashed with a bright light. Wei Jiasi was startled. She lifted the jade suspiciously, but she couldn't see any light. She muttered, "What's going on?" Enchanting naturally couldn't answer. She simply couldn't recognize this thing. The two of them saw the puzzled expression in each other's eyes. Suddenly, A bright light burst out from the jade. Before they could react, the light engulfed the two of them in an instant. Chenga felt like she was dreaming, but she couldn't remember the content of the dream. She could only vaguely hear a voice. "Husband, what's wrong with Chenga?" It was a gentle female voice. At the same time, a pair of hands gently touched her forehead. "It's nothing." The male voice was also gentle. He said softly, "Chenga is too tired. She'll be fine once she wakes up." It was another bewildering dream. Many strange thoughts floated in her mind. One moment she was flying, the next moment she couldn't remember anything. Finally, she opened her eyes. "Chenga, you're finally awake." A young married woman sitting by her bed showed a happy smile. Soon after, she called out, "Husband, husband." A refined man in his 30s entered the room and said with a smile, "Wife, I told you Chenga would be fine once she wakes up. Look, why are you so anxious?" Chenga stared at the man and woman in front of her. She seemed a bit confused, but she still obediently called out, "Father, mother, what's wrong with me?" The young married woman held her hand and said with a smile, "It's nothing. You can't be so naughty in the future. You actually climb trees to catch birds. It's fine for boys to do this kind of thing, but how can you be naughty like Tianjun?" "Mother, don't be angry. I won't do it in the future." The young married woman rebuked her by poking her forehead. "All right, mother will cook a bowl of noodles for you. Let your father teach you a lesson." Her mother went out with a smile. Her father walked over, picked her up, and put her forehead against his. "And your fever is gone. You should be fine now." She looked down at herself. Her thin body and small arms made her much shorter than her father when she stood on the bed. "Father, are you going to scold me?" "Of course not." Her father stroked her head, turned around, and crouched down. "Come here, father will take you. What's so fun about climbing trees? If you want a bird, father will catch it for you. And father is the best, better than eldest uncle and the others." "Of course. Sit tight. Momo." Her father imitated a cow's cry and ran out of the room with her on his back. Before she left the courtyard, she heard her mother shouting, "You two don't run around." Her father turned around, mooed twice, and ran out of the courtyard with her on his back. Chenga clapped her hands and laughed loudly. "Father, quick, quick." She ran to the river in the east of the village and her father put her down. "Chenga, stand here." "En?" She nodded vigorously. Her father climbed up the oldest tree in the village and found the bird on the tree. "Chenga." Chenga looked up and saw her father holding the bird and raising his hand to her. She was so excited that her little face turned red. She shouted, "Father, I want it. I want it." Her father gently got down from the tree and put the bird in her hands. "Be careful, don't strangle the bird to death. You have to raise it well in the future. Since we caught it, the big bird doesn't want it anymore." She opened her eyes in confusion. "What?" "Because the bird has a human smell on it, so the big bird can't recognize it." She was stunned and shouted, "Father, take it back. I don't want the bird anymore. That won't do." Her father gently stroked her head. His expression was obviously filled with love, but it made her feel scared. "You already caught it. The big bird doesn't want it anymore. Chirp, chirp." She heard the birds chirping and looked up. She saw two big birds angrily chirping at her as if they knew she snatched the child away. "No, no." She shouted loudly and spread out her hands holding the bird. "I'll give the bird back to you." The big birds were still chirping angrily, but they didn't fly down. They just flapped their wings and flew away. She held the bird, trembling all over. When she turned around, her father was also gone. The huge Mo's village was empty. There wasn't a single person, and it seemed like even the wind had stopped blowing. She looked down at the bird. They were all abandoned. The bird couldn't even chirp. It opened its tender beak, stood up shakily on her palm, and tilted its head to look at her. Its gaze was weak, pitiful, angry, and fierce. Suddenly, the bird that couldn't even spread its wings flew up and fiercely pecked at her eyes. Chapter 123. Xiaotian. Chenga woke up from her dream with a start and saw second uncle sitting next to her, looking at her with concern. "What's wrong?" She wiped the sweat from her forehead and shook her head. "I had a dream." Second uncle handed her a handkerchief. "Nightmare?" Chenga was silent. She couldn't seem to remember what kind of dream she had. She just felt it was very scary. "All right, if you have nothing to do, go to the front and look after the shop. You can also stroll around other shops. Don't be bored." Second uncle went out. "You seem to be in good health." Emo Chenga didn't know why she had such a thought. She shook her head in confusion and got up to wash up. This was a small market square in eastern Kunwu. She and second uncle opened a small shop here. They didn't make much money, but it was barely enough for uncle and nephew to cultivate. She cultivated diligently and was already in the 6th layer of the aura refining realm. She believed she would soon advance to the next realm. At that time, she would enter a cultivation group and diligently cultivate to advance. Because second uncle, a foundation-building cultivator, had a fairly complete set of goods in this small shop, she only hired 2 low-level cultivators as assistants. She walked into the shop and saw the 2 assistants greeting customers diligently. Business seemed to be very good, so she went out. The street was very lively. She didn't know where so many people came from, but she felt a bit of a headache. She didn't know why, but she felt like she forgot something very important. He walked around the marketplace aimlessly, and before he knew it, he had returned to his own store. Before she entered, she heard noises. "Fellow Taoists, please wait. Our boss hasn't returned yet. This has nothing to do with us." "Nothing to do with you?" A fierce voice said, "You're from this shop, so you have something to do with it. Tell me, did your shop sell this illegal goods?" "Oh. Fellow Taoist, this thing doesn't have our shop's logo, so it shouldn't be." "I said it's illegal, so how could it have a logo?" "You don't need to quibble. Take these things." Then the things on the counter fell over. Emo Chenga rushed into the shop and saw the cultivators in charge of the market square rummaging around and snatching goods. She couldn't help but shout, "Stop!" The head steward's cultivation was not weak. He turned his head and coldly snorted, "Brat, it's none of my business. Move aside." She was furious. "This is my family's shop. How could it have nothing to do with me? What is the meaning of this? We pay the management fee in full every month. You are selling illegal goods and disrupting the order of the market. According to the rules, all the goods in the store will be confiscated." Emo Chenga was stunned, but she soon sneered and said, "You casually took out something and said it was sold in our shop? Where's the proof?" The head steward sneered, "If I say so, then so be it. Take everything away." "How dare you?" Burning with anger, she raised her hand and summoned her greenwood sword. However, this was a group of cultivators whose cultivation levels were no lower than hers. Soon, she was knocked to the ground and could only watch helplessly as the shop was emptied. "Quick, be careful." The shop was empty. She was lying on the ground when she heard the voice again. Then 2 people carried second uncle in. Second uncle's body was covered in blood, and he was on the verge of death. Second uncle, what's wrong?" "You're his nephew?" "He was injured by a lightning beast. I'm afraid he won't be able to hold on for long. My condolences." Second uncle. Emo Chenga woke up from her dream again. Again? She sat on the bed in a daze. Why was it again? "You're awake?" She turned her head and saw the back of a person who seemed to be drawing talismans on the table. He was holding a brush and glancing at her from the corner of his eyes, but he was still focused on drawing. "Senior. Marshal Brother Chin?" She scratched her head, feeling like she had forgotten something. As she called out this name, a thought flashed across her mind. Is this really Senior Marshal Brother Chin? But if it wasn't Chin Shi, who could it be? Emo Chenga stood up and got off the bed. "Senior Marshal Brother Chin, we should go." Chin Shi stood up. In an instant, he took her high into the sky. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, your second uncle has entrusted you to me." She couldn't say anything. She just felt that everything in front of her was wrong. When they arrived at Mount Taikong, Chin Shi landed with her. He turned around and said with a gentle smile, "Don't be afraid. With me here I'll protect you. You should cultivate well. When you form your gold core one day, I'll tell Grandmaster and ask him to help us be together." "Help us be together?" "Yes, your second uncle has agreed to allow you to perform dual cultivation with me. When you form your gold core, he'll fulfill his promise." "Impossible." She was tongue-tied. "No, this is really wrong." Chin Shi was still affectionate. "Are you not willing?" Emo Chenga turned her head and said in a low voice, "This is absolutely impossible, Marshal." "Uncle Chin?" She didn't have the courage to look up, but she could feel spiritual aura fluctuations. In an instant she dodged an attack. When she turned around, she saw Wei Jiaxi's distorted face, her eyes filled with anger. "Senior Marshal Sister Wei." She shouted, "What are you doing?" Wei Jiaxi didn't seem to hear her. She sneered and clasped her hands, shooting a water arrow. Emo Chenga dodged in a sorry state. She turned to look at Chin Shi, hoping he could stop her. However, she saw Chin Shi smiling as if this matter didn't concern him. He was watching the two of them fight, but his smile didn't have the slightest warmth, it only made people feel terrified. Senior Marshal Sister Wei. Mo Chenga hastily wanted to take out her magic tool, but she realized her Qingquan bag wasn't with her. She turned to look at Wei Jiasi. She also didn't have a magic tool in her hand, but she was still fiercely attacking her. Senior Marshal Sister Wei, are you crazy? Wei Jiasi stopped, but her gaze became even more terrifying. I knew I couldn't let you live. You want to snatch Marshal Uncle away? No, I absolutely won't let you. Mo Chenga suddenly felt a chill in her chest. She trembled and a clear feeling emerged in her mind. No, this is really wrong. She wouldn't say this kind of thing to her. He wouldn't tease his school's disciples with evil intentions. Senior Marshal Sister Wei also wouldn't take her life for personal gain. This is all fake. Mo Chenga felt a sharp pain in her head. She didn't have enough time to parry Wei Jiasi's spell. She only felt pain in her arm, and the scene in front of her eyes was like ripples on water. They were in the vicinity of Danding School's Yu Clan, not Mount Taikong. Once she woke up from her hallucination, Mo Chenga immediately turned over to dodge Wei Jiasi's attack. She used the white silk handkerchief to completely block Wei Jiasi's attack. She then took out a beast-binding rope from her Qingquan bag and easily tied up Wei Jiasi, who had lost her mind and only knew how to use spells. Mo Chenga heaved a sigh of relief after she put away the white silk handkerchief. She looked around and found that the thin piece of jade had fallen on the ground. It had already broken into pieces. What was this thing? It could actually make her and Wei Jiasi, two middle-stage foundation-building cultivators, hallucinate at the same time. Furthermore, every time she experienced it, it was ruthlessly torn apart when she thought it was beautiful. Was it also the same for Wei Jiasi? So in the end, when they were in the same hallucination, Wei Jiasi's spirit couldn't hold on anymore, so she attacked me? Mo Chenga suddenly felt a wave of lingering fear. If it wasn't for the fact that she could no longer suffer from cultivation deviation and that she had the spirit-concealing pendant that Zhong Muling had refined once again, perhaps she would have also. Let me go. Wei Jiasi's expression was terrifying. Her gaze was filled with hatred. Mo Chenga didn't know what she saw in Mo Chenga's hallucination. Mo Chenga stepped forward, took out a medicinal pill from her Qingquan bag and threw it into Wei Jiasi's mouth. Let me go. Wei Jiasi closed her eyes and passed out. Mo Chenga pondered for a moment, then carefully put away some of the broken pieces of jade. She then helped Wei Jiasi up and flew towards Yu Clan. On the way, she saw Luo Fengxue and a foundation-building cultivator from Yu Clan in the distance. The four of them then returned to Yu Clan together. After settling Wei Jiasi down, Han Qingyu left the room. The moment the two people in the courtyard saw her, they both stared at her. Han Qingyu smiled and said, "It's nothing. Second junior marshal sister is just tired. Let her rest. Once she wakes up, she'll be fine." Mo Chenga finally felt relieved. She asked, "Senior marshal sister Han, what's going on? Why did senior marshal sister Wei and I hallucinate when we saw that thing?" Han Qingyu shook her head. "I also don't know what that thing is. However, the number of spiritual objects in this world is beyond our imagination. That thing was also hidden by a demonic beast, so maybe it's from the southern forest. We don't know much about it." What Han Qingyu said wasn't unreasonable. Countless demonic beasts lived in the southern forest. There were some things that human cultivators were familiar with, but there were also some things that only the demonic beasts living there knew about. But this thing is miraculous. It's definitely not an ordinary thing. Unfortunately, it's broken. If it were still here, it would be great. Maybe it could be made into some kind of magic weapon. Upon hearing Luo Fengshue's words, Han Qingyu knocked her head and said with a smile, "This thing shattered as soon as it was used, so it can only be used once. So what if it's made into a magic weapon? You can stop dreaming." Luo Fengxue was startled. She then nodded and said, "You're right." "Enough." Han Qingyu said sternly, "Tienga, you're saying that when you and second junior marshal sister went to investigate, you only found this wolf and this wolf, right? There weren't any other demonic beasts?" Mo Chenga nodded. "Correct. That wolf monster actually used a spirit-concealing formation, so sometimes we couldn't sense any spiritual aura fluctuations. After they died, I really couldn't sense any demonic aura. Furthermore, there were injuries on their corpses. I'm guessing they were injured and abandoned here by their original spiritual beasts. Since the wolf monster is intelligent, it was afraid its lonely demonic aura would be discovered by us, so it deliberately acted like this. What you said makes sense." Mo Chenga brought back the corpses of the two demonic beasts. Han Qingyu had also seen them, so she also made the same deduction. However, right now she still felt it was a bit unreasonable. But why did the other demonic beasts retreat? Retreating as soon as we arrived isn't something demonic beasts would do. Even if the wolf monster was naturally intelligent, it still wouldn't make such a decision. Then Senior Martial Sister Han means? Han Qingyu smiled. Her gaze deepened a bit. I'm afraid there were high-level demonic beasts dispatching them from behind. Once she said that, Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue glanced at each other. Their faces gradually paled because they both thought of one possibility. Sending low-level demonic beasts to harass the nearby clans, forcing Danding School to send cultivators out, then launching a counterattack. Chapter 124. Eldest Martial Sister, what should we do? Luo Fengxue asked anxiously. Han Qingyu didn't say anything, but her expression was very calm. She looked at Wei Jiaxi, who was lying on the bed, and made a decision. Wake second Martial Sister up first. Luo Fengxue nodded repeatedly. Upon guessing the demonic beast's movements, Mo Tiange became anxious. Han Qingyu's decision suited her temperament. Tiange, come and help. Han Qingyu and Luo Fengxue helped Wei Jiaxi up from the bed. Han Qingyu raised her head and said, Tiange, your cultivation level is also in the middle stage of the foundation building realm now. In a moment, let's pour our spiritual power into second junior martial sister's Dantian and Sea of Knowledge to wake her primordial spirit. I understand. Mo Tiange nodded. She and Han Qingyu sat behind Wei Jiaxi and listened to her orders. I'll count to 3. Pour your spiritual energy into her Lingtai acupoint. In the beginning, the spiritual energy in her body will automatically resist. You have to hold on. I'll lend you a hand if I can free up my hands. All right. Now 1, 2, 3. Right after she finished speaking, Mo Tiange immediately raised her hand, condensed her aura into her palm, and placed it on the Lingtai acupoint on Wei Jiaxi's back. However, Han Qingyu directly pressed on her Baihui acupoint. Fengxue, look after your second senior sister. If she can't hold on any longer, feed her a vitality pill. Yes, eldest senior sister. Mo Tiange's spiritual aura had a pure Yin attribute. It was ice-cold and light. After entering Wei Jiaxi's body through Lingtai acupoint, Mo Tiange immediately sensed that her spiritual aura was rebounded by Wei Jiaxi's meridians. This force was much stronger than hers. In fact, although the foundation building stage was classified differently from the Qi condensation stage, which was generally divided into early stage, mid-stage and late stage, these 3 minor stages were also divided into 9 levels. Levels 1, 2, 3 were early stage foundation building, 4, 5, 6 were mid-stage foundation building, and 7, 8, 9 were late-stage foundation building. The so-called completion of the foundational building stage was the 10th level, a step away from the core formation stage. Right now, Luo Fengxue had just advanced to the foundation building realm, so she was still in the first layer. Han Qingyu had also entered the late stage of the foundation building realm not too long ago, so she was still in the 7th layer. As for Mo Tiange and Wei Jiaxi, although they were both in the middle stage of the foundation building realm, Wei Jiaxi had been in the foundation building realm for almost 100 years. Although she was still in the middle stage, she was already in the 6th layer. Mo Tiange, on the other hand, had just broken through and was only in the 4th layer. For Qi condensation cultivators, a gap of 2 levels was already enough to affect their strength, let alone foundation establishment cultivators. Once Mo Tiange's spiritual aura entered Wei Jiaxi's meridians, the rebounding pressure made her frown. However, in the next moment she activated the spirit concealing pendant. This spirit concealing pendant originally had the function of concealing one's constitution and gathering spiritual aura. The effect of gathering spiritual aura could make the wearer's spells more refined. After Zhong Muling refined it again, this effect became even more obvious. A wisp of pure spiritual aura flowed out of the spirit concealing pendant. Mo Tiange immediately felt the pressure on her lesson. In addition, her spiritual aura had the attribute of pure Yin, so it was both soft and tough. Very soon, her spiritual aura deftly neutralized Wei Jiaxi's rebound force and advanced along her meridians towards her Dantian. Han Qingyu looked at her in astonishment. She originally wanted to help Mo Tiange later, but she didn't expect Mo Tiange to break free on her own. However, thinking that this junior martial sister of hers had a lot of fated chances, Han Qingyu figured there might be something special about her spiritual aura, so she didn't say anything and focused on slowly guiding her spiritual aura downwards. Before long, Mo Tiange's and Han Qingyu's spiritual auras converged in her Dantian. Soon after, this combined spiritual aura flowed along the special passage between her dantian and her sea of knowledge, entering her sea of knowledge. For a moment, the two of them both had pained expressions on their faces, making Luo Fengxue extremely nervous. Emo Tiange indeed felt an enormous pressure in her sea of knowledge. The sea of knowledge was the dwelling place of primordial spirits and was very far away from her dantian. However, her dantian was the only place connected to her sea of knowledge. If she wanted to enter her sea of knowledge, she had to go through her dantian, where her spiritual aura was stored. The spiritual pressure in her dantian didn't make her and Han Qingyu feel too uncomfortable. However, after entering the narrow passage in her sea of knowledge, the two of them felt that they couldn't exert any strength, so they could only slowly move forward bit by bit. Finally, the spiritual aura entered the boundless sea of knowledge. The two of them heaved sighs of relief as they found Wei Jiaxi's sleeping primordial spirit. You must be careful. Ordinary cultivators' primordial spirits are very fragile. Even this kind of weak spiritual aura can still cause pain to the divine sense. Let's wrap up her primordial spirit first, then I'll slowly apply pressure on it. Yes, Senior Martial Sister Han. Emo Tiange steadily controlled her spiritual aura, listening to Han Qingyu's instructions. With the help of the spirit-concealing pendant, Emo Tiange's ability to control spiritual aura was also very subtle. She gently spread her spiritual aura and spread it over Wei Jiaxi's primordial spirit, then stopped moving. Han Qingyu, on the other hand, was much more cautious. After a series of complicated manipulations, Wei Jiaxi's eyelashes fluttered and a pained expression appeared on her face. Fengshue's spirit-nourishing pills. Luo Fengxue immediately took out spirit-nourishing pills and fed them to Wei Jiaxi. Wei Jiaxi's primordial spirit immediately stabilized. Soon after, she opened her eyes. Second Junior Martial Sister, don't move. Wait until we extract the spiritual aura from your meridians, then you can use it. Upon hearing Han Qingyu's shout, Wei Jiaxi was startled for a moment, but she immediately did as she was told. Emo Tiange and Han Qingyu spent a lot of effort to extract the spiritual aura from Wei Jiaxi's meridians. The loss of this spiritual aura didn't really matter to them, but the sea of knowledge was a very fragile place. If they were careless and left spiritual aura inside, Wei Jiaxi would definitely be in trouble. Phew. This was the first time Emo Tiange used spiritual aura to do such a meticulous thing, so she felt extremely tired. Luo Fengxue hastily helped her down and fed her some medicinal pills. She then went back to Wei Jiaxi and asked, Second Senior Martial Sister, are you all right? Wei Jiaxi opened her eyes. She seemed to be a bit confused. What happened? Han Qingyu said gently. Second Junior Martial Sister, you and Qingge ran into an accident. You were bewitched by an illusory formation, but you're all right now. Don't think too much about it. Take a rest first. I'll tell you about it later. Wei Jiaxi didn't say anything. She lowered her head and seemed to be in a daze, seemingly trying to recall something. Second Senior Martial Sister? Luo Fengxue was a bit worried. After a long time, Wei Jiaxi finally regained her composure. She shook her head and said, I'm all right. Rest assured. How's the situation now? Han Qingyu smiled and said, I'm here, so what are you worried about? Second Junior Martial Sister, rest well. I'll tell you in detail when you're spirited again. Wei Jiaxi's expression changed, but in the end, she still nodded. This made Han Qingyu and Luo Fengxue feel relieved. They stood up and said, In that case, you rest first. We won't disturb you any longer. Wait. Wei Jiaxi raised her head. Her gaze swept over Emo Tiange's body. Tiange, I want to talk to you. Emo Tiange was stunned. She looked at Han Qingyu and Luo Fengxue. Luo Fengshue's brows were tightly knitted. Han Qingyu, on the other hand, was silent for a moment. She then gave Emo Tiange a meaningful glance and said with a smile, Tiange, since you don't have anything else to do, you can keep your Senior Martial Sister Wei company for now. Emo Tiange nodded and said, I understand, Senior Martial Sister Han. After Han Qingyu and Luo Fengxue left, Emo Tiange walked towards Wei Jiaxi. She tidied up the bed, then helped Wei Jiaxi sit up. Senior Martial Sister Wei, do you have anything to tell me? Wei Jiaxi remained silent, but her gaze never left Emo Tiange. Her gaze seemed to be scrutinizing and considering Emo Tiange. Emo Tiange stopped and sat quietly on the edge of the bed. Han Qingyu wanted Emo Tiange to be a bit more patient. After all, Wei Jiaxi had always been like this. Moreover, she was currently injured. Emo Tiange didn't care about this, so she agreed with Han Qingyu. Now that Wei Jiaxi was looking at her like this, she didn't feel displeased at all. Emo Chinga had a rough childhood and was accustomed to the fickleness of the world. How could she take these things seriously? After a long time, Wei Jiaxi finally spoke. Chinga, do you know why I asked you to stay? Her tone was actually very calm. Emo Chinga calmed down. The corners of her lips curled up into a faint smile. I don't know. Wei Jiaxi closed her eyes. No one knew what she was thinking. After a long time, she opened her eyes again and continued to speak calmly. I remember that I did something bad to you in the illusion, so I think I have the responsibility to explain it to you. Senior Martial Sister doesn't have to do this. Emo Chinga didn't want to hear those words. Senior Martial Sister doesn't owe me anything and you've never wronged me. You were just influenced by the illusion. What's there to explain? No. Wei Jiaxi stared at her resolutely. Her gaze was stubborn. Although my character isn't good and I'm unsociable and arrogant, I've never bullied or humiliated others. If I don't explain it clearly, I'll feel bad. Emo Chinga was silent for a while. She felt powerless in her heart. What happened between her and Wei Jiaxi was actually Wei Jiaxi's own feelings. In fact, it had nothing to do with Emo Chinga, but now, Emo Chinga sighed. Alright, I'll listen to whatever Senior Martial Sister Wei wants to say. After obtaining Emo Chinga's agreement, Wei Jiaxi's gaze softened and she showed a rare smile. She was actually a beautiful woman. Her eyebrows were elegant, and her face was like spring. If she smiled often, she would definitely be very amiable and cute. After thinking for a while, Wei Jiaxi said softly, Chinga, you should know that I don't like you. I don't know whether you know the reason or not. In our Clear Spring Peak, Grandmaster was a genius. Aside from the deceased martial uncle Qingyuan, he had a total of 6 advanced inner disciples. Our master ranked first, was the oldest, and also had the most disciples. More than 100 years ago, Master was still very young, and he only had 6 or 7 disciples. Among them, the only female disciples were me and eldest Martial Sister. Although the inner disciples of us core formation cultivators all had double spiritual roots, there were good and bad ones. Among them, I had the best aptitude, so my cultivation progressed very quickly. Often, even my senior martial brothers couldn't catch up to me. It could be said that I was the #1 disciple among the 3rd generation of Grandmaster's disciples. Just like that, over time, I gradually developed a sense of pride. Martial Uncle Shoujing came before I entered the sect. In fact, his age was similar to us 3rd generation disciples. Because my aptitude was excellent, I was accepted into the sect when I was a child. When I entered the sect, he seemed to have just built his foundation. At that time, I only knew that Grandmaster had an advanced inner disciple who was related to him by blood. His aptitude was quite high and his temperament was even better. However, I didn't take Martial Uncle seriously because I thought I would definitely surpass him, just like how I surpassed my senior martial brothers one by one. But I never expected that not only would I never be able to achieve this goal, but I would also be left further and further behind. Martial Uncle built his foundation when he was 20 years old. At that time, Martial Uncle Lingxi of Sweet Dew Peak had already built his foundation when he was 17 years old, so he didn't attract any attention. I also thought that for elite disciples with high aptitudes like us, building our foundation was a relatively easy threshold to cross. Building it at around 20 years old only meant that we were quite lucky. But I never expected that on the first day I saw Martial Uncle. Emo Chinga was silent as she listened to Wei Jiaxi's sometimes sweet and sometimes painful recollection. She felt empty in her heart. She couldn't even hear Wei Jiaxi's voice clearly. What was the point of telling her all this? Should she rejoice or sigh for it? Chinga, I'm very sorry. I thought I controlled my emotions very well, but in the illusory formation, I exposed myself and even had thoughts of hurting people. Fengshua was right. I walked further and further down this path and I couldn't control myself anymore. Because Martial Uncle was good to you, although I tried my best to suppress it, my heart still felt unfair. In fact, after I fainted, I was still conscious. I thought about it for a very, very long time. I know that if I want to achieve anything on the path of cultivation, I must give it up. But I tried again, and when I wanted to give it up, I felt like I was even going to give up my own heart. So, I thought it through. I don't care anymore. If I can't get it, then I won't ask for it. If I can't give it up, then I won't give it up. Right now, I'm about 100 years old, just a hair's breadth away from the late stage of the foundation establishment realm. If I don't form my core, I'll probably have about 200 years left in my lifespan. In 200 years, Uncle Master might not be able to form his nascent soul. With Marshall Uncle's temperament, if he doesn't succeed in his cultivation, he definitely won't be trapped by his emotions. By the time he decides to dual cultivate, I'm afraid I'll already be long gone. At this point, Wei Jiaxi smiled at Emo Tiange. Her gaze was filled with sorrow and determination. She said, that being the case, what should I be afraid of? Let it be like this for the rest of my life. I won't force it. If I can get it, I'll get it. If I can't let it go, I won't let it go. Whether it's foundation establishment or core formation, it's up to fate. Emo Tiange remained silent. This was the best attitude Wei Jiaxi had ever shown her, but Emo Tiange couldn't force out a smile. Because Emo Tiange clearly felt the sorrow behind Wei Jiaxi's words. This senior martial sister Wei, no matter who it was, she was such a proud person, yet now she was willing to give up her future. But from another point of view, wasn't this also a sign that she'd come to terms with it? This is my love alone. Even if the person I love has nothing to do with it, I'll guard him alone. If I can't get him, I don't care what the consequences will be. Tiange martial uncle he. Senior martial sister Wei, Emo Tiange suddenly interrupted Wei Jiaxi, I think you don't need to tell me this. What happens to martial uncle has nothing to do with me. Wei Jiaxi was also silent, but in the next moment she chuckled softly and said, yes, I was confused. Alright Tiange, please forgive me for what happened in the past. From now on, whether it has nothing to do with you or not, it's all my business. It has nothing to do with you. Wei Jiaxi woke up. Han Qingyu spent some effort to help her recover her strength and finally told her what happened. Wei Jiaxi was silent for a long time. Sure enough, she gave the answer they expected. This must be a conspiracy. Now, Danding School had many of their martial brothers and their master. Luo Fengxue was very anxious. She shouted, then what should we do now? Han Qingyu pondered for a moment and said, it's useless to be anxious now. We've already been delayed here for a while. If they wanted to set up something, they've probably already done it. As for summoning talismans, I've tried, but I don't know whether Master has received it or not. This place was quite far from Danding School. Ordinary summoning talismans couldn't be used unless they used 1,000-mile sound-transmitting talismans or 10,000-mile sound-transmitting talismans. The talisman Han Qingyu used to report this matter to Master Daoist Xianyin was none other than the 1,000-mile sound-transmitting talisman. However, it was highly likely that it was blocked by a great defensive formation. Is there any news from Yu clan? Wei Jiaxi asked. No. Han Qingyu shook her head. I mentioned it to them, but they don't know what's going on. Clan Master Yu also tried to send a message to the school, but I don't know if he can do it or not. The four of them once again sank into silence. Right now it was definitely too late for them to return to Danding School. They couldn't even guarantee their safety. Once a war broke out, it would already be great if they could rely on Yu clan's terrain and formations to stay alive. If they left without permission and the demonic beasts ran rampant outside, perhaps. Senior martial sisters, I'm afraid we don't have any other choice but to wait. After thinking for a long time, Emo Tiange said slowly, we're only 4 foundation building cultivators. There's a nascent soul cultivator in Danding School. Even if we fall into their trap, I'm afraid it won't be easy to attack. Martial Uncle Xianyin and the other martial brothers are guests in Danding School, so it shouldn't be too dangerous. On the other hand, it's hard to say for us. Yu clan only has several foundation building cultivators, and their cultivation levels aren't as high as ours. Relying on them definitely won't work. Han Qingyu pondered for a long time before she finally nodded. Tinga's right. If those demonic beasts can't defeat Danding School in a fierce battle and change their target, we'll be in danger. Then what should we do? Luo Fengxue asked. Wei Jiaxi said faintly, I think we should wait. Emo Tiange nodded in agreement. Upon seeing their reactions, Han Qingyu said, I also agree with waiting. We still can't see the current situation clearly, so it'd be better to stay put and deal with the ever-changing situation. Since the 3 of them said so, Luo Fengxue was also speechless. Alright, I also can't think of any ideas. The 4 of them agreed that Han Qingyu would be the one to negotiate with Yu clan. When Yu clan's patriarch learned of their conjectures, he became very nervous. Emo Tiange took some time to enter the virtual sky world, but she sat silently in the small room for a long time. In fact, if she stayed in the virtual sky world and didn't go out, she would naturally be very safe. However, excluding Yu clan, which had nothing to do with her, what would happen to Luo Fengxue and the other 2? Logically speaking, Xianqing School gave her a place to live and provided her with the things she needed to cultivate. She owed them a favor, not a grudge. In terms of affection, the three of them were her martial sisters. Wei Jiaxi aside, Han Qingyu and Luo Fengxue had always taken good care of her. Considering both sides, how could she disregard their safety? Of course, she could also bring them into the virtual sky world. However, she immediately rejected this idea. The virtual sky world definitely couldn't appear in front of others. Otherwise, her life would definitely be in danger. After thinking for a while, Mo Tiange made up her mind. She was no longer a little aura-refining cultivator who had no ability to protect herself anymore. She was now in the foundation-building realm. She had a certain amount of ability and she also had several magic treasures. Demonic beasts weren't good at using external objects, so she had a lot of confidence in escaping. With this thought in mind, she opened her Qingkuan bag and began to prepare. The magic weapons she had were the purple wooden cauldron, the white silk handkerchief, the enchanting lantern, the spirit-concealing pendant, and the virtual sky world. Among them, the purple wooden cauldron and the virtual sky world were useless in fights of magical powers, and the spirit-concealing pendant was the auxiliary type. Only the white silk handkerchief and the enchanting lantern could be used for direct attacks. Other magic tools included the shuttle of flying Apsara, the heaven and earth cloud silk armor, the land-fleeing ruler, and the flying needle she bought not long ago. The heaven and earth cloud silk armor could be worn directly on her body, the land-fleeing ruler was used for escaping, the shuttle of flying Apsara was used for attacking, and the flying needle was used for sneak attacks. In addition, there were talismans and other things given to her by martial uncle Xianin. If she really thought about it, she had a lot of magic treasures in her hands. Her odds of winning against cultivators in the same realm as her were relatively high, let alone against demonic beasts. Besides, she only needed a little bit of time to return to the virtual sky world. Using it together with the land-fleeing ruler couldn't be any better. She believed that even if her opponent was a core formation cultivator, as long as she was fast enough, she still had a chance to escape. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange revealed a faint smile. The virtual sky world and the fated chances of deification cultivators weren't something everyone could come across. Her current strength was also top-notch among middle-stage foundation-building cultivators. Even against late-stage foundation-building cultivators, her odds of winning weren't low. If she couldn't win, she could always run. What was there to be afraid of? Chapter 125. The group of five stood at the top of the mountain, looking at the flaming peak in the distance. That was the main vein of Mount Skyfire, where the Pill Cauldron Gate was located. The fire was still burning fiercely, but its color had dimmed a lot. With their foundation-building divine sense, they couldn't see what was happening there, but they could see the demonic beasts flitting across the sky from time to time not far away. In the past 2 days, Han Qingyu and Patriarch Yu hadn't received any response from the sound-transmitting talismans they had sent. They had long since been mentally prepared for this. The demonic beast's attack on the Pill Cauldron School had already begun. The people standing here, Mo Tiange, Han Qingyu, Luo Fengxue, Patriarch Yu and his wife, were all silent. This matter had already exceeded their capabilities. Aside from waiting, there was nothing they could do. In fact, they could understand why the demonic beasts were so obsessed with Pill Cauldron School. The Danding School was the #1 alchemist sect on Kunwu Mountain, and medicinal pills were exactly what demonic beasts lacked the most. Every time they came out of the southern forest, they would attack the sects on Kunwu Mountain in order to seize medicinal pills. As soon as they had the chance, they would naturally focus their attacks on the Danding School. However, Danding School wasn't to be trifled with. Although it was only slightly larger than a mid-level cultivation sect, it also had 3 nascent soul grandmasters. In addition to the mountain-protecting grand formation, magic treasures and so on, the demonic beasts would have to expend a lot of effort to capture Danding School. Now these people were happy on one side and worried on the other. They were happy because these demonic beasts completely ignored them and had no intention of attacking them. However, they were worried because if the Pill Cauldron School was attacked, their family and friends, the 5 of them were preoccupied and no one spoke. Wei Jiaxi still hadn't recovered, so the other 2 foundation-building cultivators from Yu clan were responsible for patrolling the area. These people were merely foundation establishment cultivators. In this kind of sect war they could not do much at all. After a long time, Han Qingyu finally said, "Let's go back." Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue glanced at each other then nodded. Han Qingyu then turned around and said, "Patriarch Yu, my martial sister and I will take our leave first. If there are any movements, please inform us." Patriarch Yu's expression was solemn as he cupped his hands absent-mindedly. Han Qingyu shook her head and sighed. She then led Mo Tienga and Luo Fengshua down the mountain. Yu clan was a clan that relied on Pill Cauldron Gate, and they even had cultivators in the sect. Presumably, Patriarch Yu was more troubled than them. If Danding School fell in this demonic beast attack, then Yu clan would definitely not have a good ending. Even if they weren't devoured by the demonic beasts, they wouldn't have any backing in the future and would definitely be bullied and humiliated again. Unfortunately, Yu clan's current foundation building cultivators were all very old. Thinking up to this point, Han Qingyu could only shake her head. Every sect or clan had their own difficulties. Even for herself, it was already very good if she could preserve her own life. Once she returned to her residence, Mo Chenga entered the virtual sky world again to meditate and cultivate. Right now, the war was right in front of her, so she wasn't in the mood to learn pill concocting. The little inferno beast she caught to provide her ardent yang real fire was raised in the virtual sky world while she cultivated the soul refining art. Now that she cultivated the soul refining art without any misgivings, she didn't have any misgivings about cultivating the soul refining art. Therefore, in the past few days she devoted almost all of her energy to cultivating it. Right now, her divine sense had more or less formed a physical body. This was her hidden trump card. Even Martial Uncle Xianin, who gave her the technique, probably didn't expect her to be able to cultivate her divine sense into a corporeal form so quickly. Other people who cultivated this art would tremble with fear. It was simply impossible for them to be like her. Furthermore, after going through the 5 spirits cultivation art, her primordial spirit was no longer as weak as before, so cultivating the soul refining art could be said to be twice the result with half the effort. Her current realm was probably something ordinary people would need to cultivate for several dozen years to be able to compare to. In a fight of magical powers, all kinds of magic tools, magic weapons and talismans had their nemesis, and they were also on guard against each other. The reason why Mo Chenga regarded the soul refining art as her trump card was because she was only in the foundation building realm. She reckoned no one would expect her to be able to control her divine sense to attack others. In the following days, aside from cultivating, she also went out to inquire about the situation of Danding School's war. Their decision not to attack was indeed correct. Since Danding School had nascent soul cultivators, the demonic beasts would naturally only dare to attack them if they had 8th rank or higher cultivators. From what they heard, the demonic beasts had 3 8th rank demonic beasts and 1 9th rank demonic beast. As for Danding School, they only had 3 nascent soul cultivators in total, and all of them were in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. Their strength couldn't be compared to Danding School's. The current war was very tragic. The mountain ridge where Yu clan was located was too close to Danding School. A foundation building cultivator's journey would take a day, but a core formation and nascent soul cultivator's journey would only take a few minutes. Because of this, battles would affect this area from time to time. Fortunately, the power of the 4 symbols formation Mo Chenga modified was quite strong. Now, all Yu clan's cultivators stayed inside the 4 symbols formation and opened it, so they were temporarily safe. However, safety was only temporary. Now that Danding School had fallen, Yu clan would definitely be affected. At that time they would also be involved. What they could do now was to preserve their strength as much as possible. In addition, they weren't Danding School's disciples, so Shenqing School wouldn't ignore Master Daoist Xuanin's presence. Observing the situation, cultivating and waiting for an opportunity. A month later, the battle entered a stalemate. More and more demonic beasts appeared in the vicinity of Yu clan, so they finally couldn't stay out of it. Fellow Taoists, please take a seat. In the middle of the night, while Mo Chenga was still cultivating, Yu clan's steward came to summon the 4 martial sisters. The 4 of them were baffled. Could it be that something important happened? Inside the hall, the moonstones emitted a soft light, illuminating the hall as bright as day. All 4 foundation building cultivators of Yu clan were present. Once Yu clan's patriarch saw them, he smiled and politely asked them to sit. For matters like this, Han Qingyu was the one who handled them. After Mo Chenga greeted the people of Yu clan, she silently sat down on the guest seat. Patriarch Yu, may I ask why you called us sisters here so late at night? After exchanging conventional greetings, Han Qingyu went straight to the point. Hesitation appeared on Patriarch Yu's face. It seemed he found it a bit difficult to speak, so he cast an awkward glance at Han Qingyu. Han Qingyu smiled and said, although you and I don't come from the same sect, we're all on the same boat in the current situation. What else can Patriarch Yu not say? Upon hearing what Han Qingyu said, a resolute expression appeared on Patriarch Yu's face. He nodded and said, what fellow Taoist Han said makes sense. Therefore, I think it'd be better to explain this matter to fellow Taoists. He paused for a moment before continuing. Fellow Taoist Han should know that our Yu clan is only a small clan relying on Danding School. We don't have any core formation cultivators, nor do we have any influence. Right now in Danding School, we only have 2 juniors who have hopes of advancing to the core formation realm. There's simply nothing for demonic beasts to covet. I think your master sent you to our Yu clan because he wants to take care of you. Based on this, your future in Shenqing School will definitely be bright. When he said that, aside from Han Qingyu, he also cast a glance at Mo Tiange. Although this Patriarch Yu's cultivation level wasn't obvious, he was very experienced. Han Qingyu was already in the late stage of the foundation building realm. As an elite disciple, she would definitely advance to the core formation realm one day. Although she might not succeed, ordinary disciples like them couldn't compare to her. As for Mo Tiange, according to Han Qingyu, she was already in the middle stage of the foundation building realm at such a young age, so her future was also limitless. The current development of the situation has certainly exceeded your expectations. Right now, although our Yu clan can still be considered safe, we're also in a precarious situation. Right now, more and more battles are happening outside the formation. From time to time, cultivators from Danding School ask for help, so our Yu clan can't just ignore them. Fellow Taoists, it's only a matter of time before our Yu clan joins the battle. Today I learned from an injured Danding School cultivator that one of our 2 Yu clan disciples in Danding School has already fallen. At this point, a slight fluctuation finally appeared on Patriarch Yu's calm and tranquil expression. Yu clan only had 2 cultivators with hopes of advancing to the core formation realm. Now that one of them had fallen in the battle, it was a huge loss for Yu clan. Besides, that person might even be a junior of Patriarch Yu's. Patriarch Yu continued, since the situation is like this, I'll tell fellow Taoists the truth. Patriarch Yu straightened his expression and a resolute expression flitted across his face. He said word by word, since we can't avoid this disaster, our Yu clan will join the battle from now on. Mo Tiange and the others raised their heads and looked at each other, but none of them said anything. In fact, they weren't surprised. Yu clan would be dragged into the demonic beast battle sooner or later. However, they were a bit surprised that Patriarch Yu was so resolute. Mo Tiange looked to her left and right. When Madame Yu heard what Patriarch Yu said, she quietly held Patriarch Yu's hand as if she wanted to comfort him. The other 2 foundation-building cultivators of Yu clan also calmly looked at Patriarch Yu. Obviously, they approved of his decision. Han Qingyu was silent for a moment before she finally raised her head and said with a smile, "We admire fellow Taoists' decisiveness." Patriarch Yu smiled and said sincerely, "But if we do this, we'll be wasting your master's painstaking efforts. Fellow Taoists came to our Yu clan to help us protect our clansmen, but now we're going to drag fellow Taoists down with us. I feel guilty about this matter, so I'm telling you this frankly. For the sake of your own safety, fellow Taoists can leave. We definitely won't stop you." Patriarch Yu's expression was sincere and didn't seem fake. However, this matter was of great importance, so Han Qingyu didn't immediately make a decision. Instead, she pondered for a while before she said, "Patriarch Yu, since that's the case, could you let us martial sisters discuss this matter for a while?" "Of course." Patriarch Yu revealed a smile. "Our Yu clan will join the battle tomorrow. Fellow Taoists can go back and discuss it in detail. If you come to a decision, it won't be too late to tell us tomorrow." "In that case, many thanks." Han Qingyu stood up and saluted him. Patriarch Yu hastily returned the salute. "We don't dare." Mo Tiange could see that Patriarch Yu naturally wanted them to stay. After all, their strength was far superior to the foundation-building cultivators of Yu clan. However, the current situation was unpredictable. Core formation and even nascent soul cultivators would participate in the battle, so staying here wasn't safe. Besides, they were Shenqing School disciples, so they couldn't be offended. The 4 martial sisters returned to the small courtyard they lived in and gathered in Han Qingyu's room. For a while, the 4 of them didn't say anything. Even Luo Fengxue, who was the most talkative, looked like she had a lot on her mind. After a long time, Han Qingyu raised her head and swept a glance at them. She said, "All right, do you have anything you want to say? This matter is of great importance, so I won't use my eldest martial sister's name to make a decision. If you have something to say, you can speak frankly." Eldest martial sister. Luo Fengxue wanted to say something but hesitated. Mo Tiange and Luo Fengxue had been friends for several years. Upon seeing the struggle on Luo Fengxue's face, Mo Tiange could roughly guess what Luo Fengxue wanted to say. Han Qingyu said, There's only us martial sisters here. What's there to be afraid of? Luo Fengshue looked at Wei Jiaxi and Emo Tiange, then said, Eldest martial sister, we're not Danding school disciples. Now that the situation is critical, they definitely won't blame us if we leave on our own. Han Qingyu nodded. You're right. We cultivators don't value loyalty like chivalrous people do. Now that we're out of our strength, we can naturally leave. Having obtained Han Qingyu's affirmation, Luo Fengshue felt reassured. She stared at Han Qingyu expectantly and said, Then we? Han Qingyu shook her head. That's not what I'm thinking. Think about it. Right now the flames of war are everywhere. Even if we leave this place, how are we going to return to Xianqing school? Luo Fengshue was stunned. She wasn't good at fights of magical powers, so she naturally hoped to leave the war situation as soon as possible. However, what Han Qingyu said was also true. When we leave Xianqing school, our masters and martial uncles will send us back with flying magic weapons. If we return to Xianqing school on our own, I'm afraid it'll take us 1 or 2 months. On the way back there will be flames of war everywhere. How are we going to protect ourselves? Luo Fengshue couldn't answer this question. Eldest martial sister. Do you support staying here? Han Qingyu slowly shook her head. No. For the time being, I can't think of a solution. I still don't have an idea. Luo Fengshue was also silent. Han Qingyu then looked at Wei Jiaxi. Second junior martial sister, what do you think? Wei Jiaxi's cultivation level had already recovered in the past few days, but her complexion was still pale. When she heard Han Qingyu's question, she seemed to be in a daze. Han Qingyu called out again, Second junior martial sister? Wei Jiaxi suddenly realized that the 3 people's gazes were on her, but she only said, I'll let eldest martial sister decide. Upon seeing Wei Jiaxi's appearance, Han Qingyu sighed inwardly. In the end, she turned towards Emo Tiange and asked, Tiange, what about you? Emo Tiange muttered to herself for a long time before she finally said, Senior martial sister Han, I think we'd better stay here for the time being and observe the situation. Stay here? Han Qingyu and Luo Fengshue glanced at each other, then shifted their gazes to Emo Tiange. Emo Tiange nodded. Correct. Senior martial sisters, let me put it this way. I'm quite confident in Yu Clan's 4 symbols formation. Unless several core formation cultivators or above attack it, it won't be broken. Moreover, with Senior Martial Sister Han in charge and Senior Martial Sister Luo familiar with personnel management, and me in charge of the formation, the chances of us persevering are very high. Emo Tiange quickly swept her gaze over them, then said, Of course, this also has its risks. If this place is noticed by high-ranked demonic beasts and they focus their attacks on us, we might not be able to escape. Han Qingyu and Luo Fengshue both sank into contemplation. Compared to what Emo Tiange said earlier, the risks weren't too great. They also didn't have any better ideas. It was just staying here or leaving. However, escaping with their lives in this chaotic war was also not easy. The first to make a decision was Han Qingyu. After thinking for a moment, Han Qingyu revealed a determined expression and said, Tiange, since you're confident, why don't we stay here? Eldest martial sister. Luo Fengshue called out. Han Qingyu turned towards Luo Fengshue and said with a faint smile, I've been thinking about it. If we want to preserve our lives, we might as well borrow Yu Clan's strength. Of course, their strength isn't that strong, so the 4 of us can exterminate Yu Clan if we want to. However, Yu Clan has been rooted here for a long time, so we can make use of it. Whether we borrow people or borrow land, it'll be much safer than staying outside by ourselves. But Luo Fengshue's mind was in a mess. She hadn't built her foundation long ago and had lived in a famous cultivation group since she was a child, so she wasn't interested in fights of magical powers. Now that they were involved in a chaotic war, she was the most helpless one. Fengshue, don't be afraid. Han Qingyu comforted her softly. You've never been in a war, so you're not used to it. Your second martial sister and I both experienced the demonic beast riot 60 years ago. We were also like this in the beginning, but after experiencing a lot, we gradually got used to it. Have some confidence in yourself. You're a disciple of a famous cultivation group, and you also have magic tools and magic weapons bestowed upon you by Master. You're much stronger than other people, so what's there to be afraid of? After being comforted, Luo Fengshue actually calmed down a bit. Upon seeing Luo Fengshue's appearance and receiving a meaningful glance from Han Qingyu, Emo Tiange walked over, held Luo Fengshue's hand and said with a smile, Senior martial sister Luo, you're my senior martial sister. You mustn't lose to me. Luo Fengshue revealed a bitter smile and said calmly, Tiange, I won't hide it from you. In the past I didn't think you were capable, but after this incident, I realized I was a frog at the bottom of a well and underestimated others. A few days ago, it was you who reminded me not to be too anxious, and these past few days, you've been much calmer than me. Senior Marshal Sister Luo. Seeing that Luo Fengxue was becoming more and more remorseful as she spoke, Mo Chenga interrupted her. The current situation is like this. You and I should pull ourselves together. What Chenga said is right. Han Qingyu was very perceptive. Upon seeing Mo Chenga's gloomy expression, she knew Mo Chenga might have thought of something unpleasant, so she immediately changed the topic. In addition, there's another reason why I want to stay here. What? Han Qingyu took out a jade slip and said, before we left, Master told me that if something unexpected happened, I must protect you and support him. This time even Wei Jiaxi, who didn't care about this matter, was stunned. They all knew that Han Qingyu had a steady temperament and handled matters steadily. As the eldest martial sister, she served their master diligently and took good care of her junior martial brothers and sisters, so their master had always trusted her. In comparison, Wei Jiaxi didn't find it unfair because she always thought that their eldest martial sister was good at handling miscellaneous matters, so it was normal for their master to entrust matters unrelated to their cultivation to their eldest martial sister. But now that Han Qingyu took out their master's secret order, Wei Jiaxi felt a bit upset. As it turned out, not only did their master trust their eldest martial sister, but he also entrusted her with an important task. Wei Jiaxi, who had also been their master's advanced inner disciple for a long time, actually didn't know anything about this beforehand. Han Qingyu didn't know or care about Wei Jiaxi's little thoughts. She handed the jade slip to Wei Jiaxi, who then passed it to them one by one. After the three of them finished reading the jade slip, Han Qingyu finally said, Master already anticipated that this trip wouldn't go smoothly, so he gave me this order and told me to do as I see fit. Right now, I think Chenga's words are very reasonable. That being the case, we might as well do as Master said. The three of them didn't say anything. The order Master Daoist Xianin left behind was very simple. He told them to wait for an opportunity to find a place outside the Danding Gate. If there was any danger, they were to stay there to support the other disciples in order to preserve their strength. From what he said, it was obvious that he already knew this trip wouldn't be simple, so he sent them out to avoid dragging them into the flames of war. First, it was because he wanted to take care of the female disciples. Second, it was because he had confidence in their ability to handle matters. Senior Martial Sister Han, after a long time, Mo Chenga said slowly, since that's the case, let's do as Martial Uncle Xianin said. I think Yu Clan's decision is perfect. We might as well borrow Yu Clan's land for the time being and rely on each other. If things go south, we're all foundation-building cultivators, so it'll be easy for us to escape. And what Chenga said is exactly what I thought. Second Junior Martial Sister, Fengxue, what do you two think? Chapter 126. Mo Chenga stood on the tallest tower of Yu Clan's gate, staring at the defensive barrier of the formation above Yu Clan. Two cultivators and a demonic beast were fighting on it. One of the cultivators was overjoyed to see her and shouted, Fellow Daoist, please help us. Mo Chenga frowned slightly, feeling a bit unhappy. That demonic beast was a 5th-rank demonic beast, which was equivalent to an early-stage core formation human cultivator. However, demonic beasts didn't have talismans, magic weapons, and the like, so their fighting abilities were a bit weaker than early-stage core formation cultivators. But in any case, it was a 5th-rank demonic beast. It was difficult for two middle-stage foundation-building cultivators to fight it, yet they actually led it to Yu Clan's territory to ask for help. They really didn't care about the lives of Yu Clan's mortals and early-stage cultivators. Maybe they even wanted to divert the disaster to someone else so they could escape. Although this idea was a bit malicious, Mo Chenga wasn't afraid to speculate about other people's intentions. Even if they didn't mean it, it was subconsciously so. Facing a 5th-rank demonic beast, even if they were disciples of famous cultivation groups, the two of them couldn't fight back and could only dodge its attacks. It was getting harder and harder for them to dodge. The other person shouted, Fellow Daoist, are you going to stand by and watch? His tone was really unpleasant. Mo Chenga glanced around. There were only a few low-level cultivators nearby looking at them in awe. The others had already been settled by Clan Master Yu. She chuckled softly and said faintly, I'm a guest here, not the host. This kind of matter should be decided by the host. You two should wait. You, the person who spoke later, turned purple. He could naturally tell Mo Chenga was being perfunctory, but right now their lives were at stake. Because of this carelessness, the other person was hit by the demonic beast's wing. He screamed and flew out. Junior Marshal brother. The person shouted and glared at Enchanting. He started to lead the demonic beast around in circles. He really couldn't hold on any longer. Fortunately, Clan Master Yu and his wife hurried over. Seeing this scene, he said to Enchanting, "Fellow Taoist Emo, please help us." Enchanting knew what he meant and nodded. "I'll open the formation. You go and save the injured person. Remember, you have to be fast. There's only half an hour left. If you can't come in by then, I'll close the formation for the safety of others." Yes. In the past few days they had received a lot of cultivators one after another. Patriarch Yu was also very clear about Enchanting's rules. Now if she said one incense stick was one incense stick, then it was one incense stick. What's more, a rank 5 demonic beast had appeared this time, which was beyond their ability. It was already very good that they could save people. Clan Head Yu shouted, "Fellow Taoist above, we will open the array formation for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. Please come in as soon as possible. If you can't come in, there is nothing we can do." The man was overjoyed and shouted, "Thank you very much. Please open the formation as soon as possible. I can't hold on any longer." Enchanting still didn't hurry. She put her palms together, made a hand seal, and began to read an incantation. This ancient 4 symbols formation wasn't controlled by formation flags like today's. Instead, it had corresponding hand seals and incantations, so it was easier to control it. Along with her incantation, a layer of light flashed on the protective barrier, followed by a buzzing sound. Upon hearing this sound, Enchanting chanted the incantation even faster. All of a sudden, a sharp cry rang out and a small hole appeared on the top of the protective barrier. Enchanting shouted, "Hurry up." Clan Master Yu responded and immediately flew out with his wife, pouncing on the person on the ground. The cultivator being chased by the demonic beast was overjoyed and rushed over. Enchanting was furious. This person was really selfish. He directly rushed in like this. Wasn't he afraid of attracting the demonic beast to harm Yu clan? Her expression became even more solemn as she stared at the demonic beast behind the man. She changed her hand seal, and the formation eyes of the 4 symbols formation suddenly shone, changing into the light of the azure dragon, the white tiger, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise, which shone on the demonic beast. The light seemed to have substance. When it shone on the demonic beast, it stagnated and emitted smoke. The demon beast let out an angry roar. It flapped its wings and began to fight with the light beast created by the formation. In an instant, the spirit stones in the formation eyes shattered, and even the spiritual aura inside her body disappeared like crazy. Enchanting clenched her teeth and secretly released her divine sense. She looked for an opportunity between the 5th-ranked demonic beast and the 4 symbols formation and ruthlessly lashed it. The 5th-ranked demonic beast immediately roared in pain. The light of the 4 symbols formation pounced on it and bit it. The cultivator took this opportunity to rush into the formation. Clan Master Yu and his wife also moved quickly and entered after the cultivator. Seeing this, Enchanting immediately made a hand seal. Together with the incantation, a light flashed on the protective cover and it closed again. The demonic beast struggled several times, but seeing that it was to no avail, it finally left unwillingly. Seeing that the formation closed and the demonic beast left, everyone present heaved sighs of relief. Enchanting slowly lowered her hands, clutched her chest and coughed. "Fellow Taoist Emo." Madam Yu cried out in alarm. Enchanting wiped the blood she coughed up and shook her head. "I'm fine. I used too much spiritual aura just now. Quickly go to each formation eye and add spirit stones." Madam Yu didn't dare to be negligent and personally went to the formation eye. Enchanting finally turned to look at Clan Master Yu and the 2 cultivators who just came in. Clan Master Yu was examining the injuries of the cultivator who fainted, while the other cultivator was meditating with his eyes closed. He didn't even spare her a glance. Enchanting shook her head. She swallowed a small reversion pill then no longer paid attention to them. Among the 2 cultivators, the one who fainted was the younger one. He seemed to be in his early 30s. The one who was meditating was the older one. He seemed to be in his 40s. The 2 of them were wearing Danding School's robes and had an arrogant attitude. They were probably elite disciples. Moreover, they were already in the middle stage of the foundation building realm at such a young age. Presumably, they had a bright future ahead of them, which was why they treated people like this. Saving the 2 of them was within her ability, and it was also Clan Master Yu's request. Emo Chenga didn't expect their gratitude, so she didn't take it to heart. After Clan Master Yu examined the man's injuries, Madame Yu returned, and the two of them worked together to heal the man. Before long, the man faintly woke up and called out, "Uncle, Auntie?" Seeing that he woke up, Clan Master Yu said happily, "Good, good. It's good that you're awake. Don't talk for now. Go back and heal your injuries." Emo Chenga was stunned. So this person was actually the only foundation-building cultivator from Yu Clan in Danding School? No wonder he asked her to help him so naturally. This was his home. However, in any case, she was still a disciple of another cultivation group, so he was being too rude. After sending someone to take that Yu Clan Jr. back, Clan Master Yu turned around and cupped his hands towards Emo Chenga with sincerity. "I can't thank you enough. Fellow Taoist Emo, I'll remember this favor." Emo Chenga said faintly, "Clan Master Yu doesn't need to be polite. I just did what I could." Patriarch Yu didn't take Emo Chenga's words seriously. He took out a bottle of medicinal pills and said, "Fellow Taoist Emo was injured just now. This is called Green Hanging Pill, a secret medicine of my Yu Clan. Its effect is much better than the small reversion pill." Secret healing pills happened to be what Emo Chenga lacked, so she accepted the bottle without hesitation. "Thank you." After a while, the cultivator who was healing on the spot finally opened his eyes and exhaled. He looked up and stood up to greet Clan Master Yu. "Uncle Yu, thank you for saving me." Clan Master Yu smiled and helped him up. "I didn't see you clearly just now. Turns out it's Junior Marshal Brother Zhou. Junior Marshal Brother Zhou is too polite." "What do you mean by, uncle?" "Our cultivation levels are the same, so I'm already very happy that you called me Senior Marshal Brother." This Junior Marshal Brother Zhou didn't say anything else. Emo Chenga could see that he didn't really care about Clan Master Yu, who had no hope of making a realm breakthrough. He was probably only being polite because of that Junior Marshal Brother Yu. A trace of contempt flashed in his eyes as he asked Clan Master Yu, "May I know where Junior Marshal Brother Yu is? How are you now?" Clan Master Yu said, "I'm fine. I'm resting in the back. If Junior Marshal Brother Zhou wants to see me, I'll have someone lead the way." Soon after, he called a low-level cultivator over and gave him some instructions. Junior Marshal Brother Zhou cupped his hands, gave Emo Chenga a similarly contemptuous glance, then followed the low-level cultivator. After that person left, Clan Master Yu sighed, then turned to Emo Chenga and said, "Fellow Taoist Emo, please don't mind him. This Junior Marshal Brother Zhou's temperament has always been like this. He doesn't have any bad intentions." Emo Chenga smiled. She'd seen this kind of person many times, but none of them were as obvious as this Junior Marshal Brother Zhou. Even Wei Jiasi only looked arrogant on the surface. She definitely wouldn't look at people like this, nor would she order people around. This Junior Marshal Brother Zhou was the only one who was really annoying. Looking at Emo Chenga's expression, Clan Master Yu roughly guessed what she was thinking. He felt a bit embarrassed, but he didn't say anything. This Junior Marshal Brother Zhou wasn't a member of Yu Clan. Out of respect for his nephew, it was enough for him to comfort her. The two of them stood silently on top of Yu Clan's gate tower, gazing into the distance. From time to time, they would see flight lights passing by, as well as the lights of fights of magical powers. In the past 2 days, they'd heard about the current situation from the cultivators who came in from the outside. The current situation wasn't good. All of Danding School's disciples had been sent to the battlefield, and even the part-time disciples were no exception. Since part-time disciples were also sent to the battlefield, it was clear how desperate the situation was. Later, part of Danding School's great mountain protecting formation was shattered. All the cultivation clans attached to it received Danding School's order to fight. Of course, not all clans obeyed the order. Now that Danding School was on the brink of destruction, some people naturally wanted to stay out of trouble. However, demonic beasts wouldn't negotiate with humans, so they could only hope they were lucky and didn't run into a high-level demonic beast. There were many reasons why Yu Clan participated in the war. First, Yu Clan was too small. If they wanted to preserve their strength before choosing a strong cultivator to attach themselves to, they might as well gamble with their lives that Danding School, a cultivation group that had existed for several thousand years, wouldn't be defeated by a demonic beast riot. Second, one of Yu Clan's promising foundation-building cultivators had already died in this chaotic war. Although they were angry, they actually let go of the matter. No matter how bad things were, they might not necessarily be able to preserve their strength, so they might as well fight with their lives on the line. Because of this, Emo Chenga rather admired this Clan Master Yu. Being able to be so decisive, this Clan Master Yu could also be considered a character. She heard Danding School had sent out countless summoning talismans asking for help. Presumably, in a month or two their comrades would come to help. If it was too early, those people wouldn't want to sacrifice themselves. If it was too late, Danding School would be defeated, which would most likely affect the level of pill concocting in all of Kunwu. Presumably they just had to endure until then. The two of them watched silently for a while. Then Clan Master Yu suddenly said, "In a few days it'll be the new year." Emo Chenga was dumbfounded. Cultivation was timeless, and cultivators didn't pay attention to this kind of secular ceremony. Whether it was in Yunwu sect, Shenqing school or when she was with second uncle, they never celebrated the new year. At most they only told her that she'd grown 1 year older. Since this Clan Master Yu suddenly brought it up like this, it seemed the people of cultivation clans paid more attention to these things. Gazing at the firelight in the distance, Clan Master Yu smiled gloomily and said, "During the new year last year my other grandnephew advanced to the foundation building realm when he was just 30 years old. At that time, we thought Yu clan's future was bright and might produce a core formation cultivator. Unexpectedly during this new year, my grandnephew already passed away." Clan Master Yu didn't say anything, but Emo Chenga could still feel his sorrow. For cultivators of cultivation clans, having no successor was probably the most sorrowful thing. Just like Yi clan in the past. Even though they produced an amazingly talented core formation cultivator, they had no successor and in the end, they had to withdraw from Mount Qingming in dejection. Clan Master Yu wiped the corners of his eyes, then turned around and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Emo, don't blame me. I'm old, so I tend to let my imagination run wild." Alas, Emo Chenga shook her head. "It's nothing." The two of them were silent for a while. Then Clan Master Yu asked, "Fellow Taoist Emo, you're quite young. You don't seem to have a technique to preserve your appearance. May I know how old you are?" Emo Chenga paused. Asking about someone's age was something cultivators rarely did. However, this Clan Master Yu was quite old, so treating him as an elder wasn't a big deal. She thought for a moment, then answered, "After this new year, I'll be 25. 25. Clan Master Yu was shocked. "Fellow Taoist Emo, you're already in the middle stage of the foundation building realm, but you're actually only 25? Emo Chenga nodded. Although it was surprising, the middle stage of the foundation building realm wasn't a shocking cultivation level, so it wasn't a big deal. Clan Master Yu sighed from the bottom of his heart. "No wonder your senior martial sister praised you for being young and promising. I thought my grandnephew could be considered outstanding among the elite disciples of big cultivation groups, but compared to fellow Taoist, he's really not worth mentioning." Emo Chenga smiled but didn't feel proud of herself. "Clan Master Yu, you're too polite. In fact, it hasn't been long since I built my foundation. I only managed to enter the middle stage of the foundation building realm because of my elder's love and some fated chances. I'm really ashamed to say this." "Hey," Clan Master Yu said earnestly, "fated chances are also a part of strength. Fellow Taoist Emo, you really don't need to be so modest. If it were my untalented sons and grandsons, even if they were given enormous fated chances, I'm afraid they still wouldn't be able to advance to such a realm." Emo Chenga still smiled and cupped her hands at Clan Master Yu's praise. Clan Master Yu's words showed that he didn't know what kind of great fated chances she'd encountered. After obtaining the art of the origin, her crippled spiritual roots suddenly became heaven-gifted. After obtaining guidance from a deification cultivator, her future cultivation journey would be shortened by at least 10 to 20 years compared to others. Coupled with the 5 spirits body cultivating fate, she could be said to have reduced the time she needed to cultivate the deification art by more than half. Lastly, there was the virtual sky world. Although she hadn't had the time to use the greatest treasure inside, the formation in front of her now came from it. If it was before, she would have definitely been like Clan Master Yu, thinking that fated chances were only auxiliary. However, after obtaining them, she realized that fated chances really couldn't be underestimated. Back then, there was a rumor in Kunwu that a cultivator with an extremely poor aptitude obtained an enormous fated chance and advanced to the nascent soul realm. With his divine power, he could run amok in the celestial pole. Now it seemed like it was the truth. Clan Master Yu said, "Fellow Taoist Mo, may I know which Master Taoist of Shenqing school you and your fellow martial sisters are under?" When they came, they only said they received orders from their master and accepted Danding School's dispatch to provide assistance, but they didn't mention their master's name. With Clan Master Yu's status, he probably wasn't qualified to know these things. However, this matter wasn't a secret. Mo Chinga said, "My senior martial sisters are all martial uncle Xuanin's disciples. I was also taught by martial uncle Shenin, so we can be considered to be from the same sect. I see. Clan Master Yu didn't ask why she called him martial uncle alone. After all, this kind of matter was a personal secret. The two of them chatted for a while. Clan Master Yu saw that Emo Chinga had this kind of cultivation level at such a young age and treated people very calmly, so he wanted to befriend her. Thus, Emo Chinga also treated him amiably. Perhaps they'd really be useful in the future by forming a predestined relationship. Just as they were talking, someone came to report that the condition of the young foundation building cultivator from Yu clan had changed. Clan Master Yu was extremely worried and immediately rushed over. Emo Chinga originally didn't plan to care, but Han Qingyu happened to come to take over, so she secretly ordered Emo Chinga to go and take a look at the situation. Emo Chinga followed Clan Master Yu into the inner courtyard of Yu clan. When she entered the room, she once again received a hostile gaze from that junior martial brother Zhou. Emo Chinga raised her lips, feeling a bit helpless. This junior martial brother Zhou was a foundation-building cultivator who looked to be in his 40s. He was at least 100 years old, yet he was still so childish. This disciple of Danding School didn't seem to be very good after all. Ashi, how are you? Clan Master, you seem to have a very close relationship with this cultivator. The young Yu clan cultivator lay on the bed with a gloomy expression and a bitter smile on his face. Uncle, I'm sorry, Ashi, don't say that. Clan Master Yu held the man's hand tightly and comforted him. Take good care of yourself. You'll get better. We still have a lot of green hanging pills, Uncle. The man interrupted him with a sorrowful look in his eyes. Uncle, my injuries. I know them clearly. Maybe they can be healed, but I've probably been beaten back to the aura refining realm. Clan Master Yu's expression was greatly shaken. Emo Chinga saw that his hand, which was holding the man's hand, was trembling slightly. Being beaten back to the aura refining realm. Emo Chinga knew how serious his injuries were. When it came to realms regressing, the better ones could spend several years to regain their cultivation level. As for the worse ones, they might never be able to advance even an inch in their entire lives. Uncle. Upon seeing Clan Master Yu's expression, the man's eyes were filled with tears. I'm sorry. For more than 50 years you tried your best to train me, but no. Clan Master Yu regained his composure and calmed down. His voice was firm. Ishi, don't worry. When the war is over, Uncle will help you think of a way. Don't think too much about it now. Our Yu clan is still fine. We have to get through this hurdle first. The man wiped away his tears. Probably because he didn't want Clan Master Yu to feel sad, he nodded and said, Yes, Uncle, don't worry. I don't want to die yet. However, Emo Chinga clearly saw desolation in his eyes. He obviously knew he wouldn't be able to recover. Emo Chinga shook her head inwardly. With her eyesight, she could roughly see that this man was indeed in bad shape. His meridians were severely damaged. Even if his Dantian was fine, he would at least fall back to the early stage of the foundation building realm. Chapter 127. You're saying that person's cultivation level has regressed? Upon hearing Han Qingyu's question, Emo Chinga nodded and said, That's right. I can see that his meridians were damaged too seriously, so his cultivation level regressed. Han Qingyu pondered for a moment, then sighed. This is troublesome. Emo Chinga stared at her strangely. Senior Martial Sister Han, we didn't consider this Yu clan cultivator to be part of our fighting force. Why is it troublesome? Han Qingyu said, Think about it. This clan master Yu decided to participate in the battle because another foundation building junior died. Could it be that because this junior's cultivation level regressed back to the aura refining realm, Yu clan lost all hope and decided to fight to the death with the demonic beasts? Emo Chinga was shocked. This is very possible. Seeing that Emo Chinga understood this point, Han Qingyu smiled bitterly. If it were me, I might also do the same. People without clans probably don't understand this feeling. Clans without hope are just struggling at death's door. I'm afraid this clan master Yu already has this kind of intention. Emo Chinga calmly thought about it, then said, Senior Martial Sister Han, if that's the case, doesn't that mean we'll also? Correct. If that's the case, we'll also be in danger. The matter Master entrusted us with won't be easy to handle. Han Qingyu thought for a moment, then said, How about this? In a moment, I'll go and see what's going on with that Yu clan brat. If there's a way, I'll lend him a hand, lest Yu clan gives up hope and disregards everything. If there's no way, then we'll withdraw from Yu clan when necessary. We can't throw our lives away for them. Emo Chenga could only nod. Since senior martial sister said so, let's do it. Emo Chenga stopped talking about Han Qingyu and entered the virtual sky world again. She sat in silence and pondered. Every time she entered the virtual sky world, she would lay a spirit-dispersing formation inside the house to make others feel there was a foundation-building cultivator inside. This was to prevent Han Qingyu and the others from feeling strange and discovering her secret. In the virtual sky world, she could clearly sense everything happening in the outside world. If something happened, she could come out in a flash. Unfortunately, entering the virtual sky world required some effort. Otherwise, she wouldn't have to worry about her life. She was both happy and worried about the current situation. What Emo Chenga was glad about was that Han Qingyu had already made preparations. This senior martial sister Han was the same as Luo Fengxue. They were both good at handling matters. Furthermore, her experience in fights of magical powers was many times richer than Luo Fengxue's. Since Han Qingyu had already made arrangements, Emo Chenga didn't need to put too much thought into it. What worried him was that the Yu family wasn't stable right now, and he didn't know when problems would arise. She thought for a while but still couldn't find a solution, so she shook her head and went back to cultivating. She had already tried out the power of the soul refining art for the first time when she was helping the Yu Clan Junior and Zhou cultivator, so she was full of expectations for this cultivation technique. Right now, she was only in the middle stage of the foundation building realm and had just advanced not too long ago, yet she was able to easily injure a 5th-ranked demonic beast. From this, it could be seen that injuries to one's divine sense couldn't be judged by the depth of one's cultivation level. In this way, even if she were to face a core formation cultivator, she still had the ability to resist. He cultivated, and a day passed. The next day, Emo Chenga heard faint footsteps, so she woke up from her cultivation. She immediately emerged from the virtual sky world and pretended to be cultivating. Chenga? It was Luo Fengshue's voice. Emo Chenga removed the formation and opened the door. Senior martial sister Luo? Luo Fengxue looked anxious and her forehead was covered in sweat. She said anxiously, "Quick, let's go. They're fighting." Emo Chenga was stunned. Luo Fengxue came in and dragged her out. "I don't have time to talk to you. I saw something wrong outside before I went out, so I hurried to find you." Emo Chenga was stunned. She followed Luo Fengxue out the door, but when she looked up, she finally understood what was wrong. The sky was filled with flames. The area outside the Four Symbols Formation's defensive barrier was full of flames. It was daytime, but the flames illuminated the entire Yu clan. If it was nighttime, it would probably be as bright as daytime. Emo Chenga roughly sensed that there were at least a dozen foundation-building cultivators and several hundred aura-refining cultivators and demonic beasts in the surroundings. She and Luo Fengxue glanced at each other. Both of their faces were deathly pale. What did so many cultivators and demonic beasts mean? It meant that the area around Yu clan had become the main battlefield. Although they'd long expected that a large-scale battle would break out in the vicinity one day, they didn't expect that day to come so soon. The two of them staggered and flew to the highest tower. Sure enough, Han Qingyu and the people from Yu clan were already there, as well as the cultivators they saved one after another during this period of time. Once she saw them, Han Qingyu pulled them over and said solemnly, "I don't know what's going on, but they fought until here today. I don't have time to talk to you right now. Prepare for battle. Yu clan." She cast a glance at Clan Master Yu and the others not far from them, then looked at Emo Chenga. "It won't be long before Yu clan asks you to open the formation. Do as you see fit." Emo Chenga cast a glance at them, then said in a low voice, "Senior martial sister Han means." Han Qingyu smiled bitterly. "I want to get involved, but things are happening too fast. Just do what you need to do. There's no need to have any misgivings. I'll talk to Master, that is, if we can still see him." Since Han Qingyu said that, Emo Chenga naturally understood. She nodded and said, "All right, I understand." Right after they finished speaking, Clan Master Yu came over. "Fellow Taoists." Without waiting for them to finish greeting each other, Clan Master Yu's gaze fell on Emo Chenga. "Today I'll have to shamelessly ask fellow Taoist for help again." Emo Chenga nodded. She didn't waste time talking nonsense with him and asked straightforwardly, "Clan Master Yu, when do you plan to attack?" Clan Master Yu glanced at the defensive barrier in the sky, then shifted his gaze to the numerous fighting figures in the distance. His expression became firm. "Now. What about the mortals and low-level cultivators?" Clan Master Yu's expression turned bitter. "I've already moved them to the back of the mountain. It'd be best if they can survive, but if they can't, they can only blame themselves for being unlucky." Since things had reached this point, there was nothing left to say. Immerse took a few steps forward, then laid a simple defensive formation next to her position. She then started to make hand seals, closed her eyes and recited some incantations. As she recited the incantations, the four symbols formation suddenly emitted a burst of light. The lights of the four symbols, azure dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird and black tortoise, appeared in the east, west, north and south. After a flash, a gap appeared in the middle. Clan Master Yu shouted, "Fellow Taoists, if you can't hold on, please quickly enter the formation." Upon hearing such good news, all the cultivators in the fierce battle were delighted. Some clenched their teeth and persevered in killing demonic beasts, while others looked relieved and rushed towards the gap. Whenever a demonic beast chased after them, the lights of the four symbols leaped from the four directions and tore the invaders apart. Several cultivators from Clan Master Yu also jumped out of the gap and began to fight with the demonic beasts. Although Immerse had seen the scene of humans and demons fighting on the day she left Mount Taikong, it was far inferior to what she saw today. In the secular world, hunters hunted beasts and occasionally died in beast stomachs. In the cultivation world, humans hunted beasts and were swallowed by them if they slipped. However, in any case it was usually humans who dominated, but this wasn't the case today. Seriously speaking, there were more demons, so this battle became even more tragic. Demons used their claws and fangs, humans used their magic weapons and talismans, and they crowded together. Sometimes humans killed demons and sometimes demons ate humans. Fortunately, there were no demonic beasts in the 5th rank or higher this time, so Immerse didn't find it too strenuous to control the four symbols formation. She just had to take restorative panaceas from time to time to replenish her spiritual aura. Han Qingyu and Wei Jiasi guarded the gap in the formation to reduce the pressure on Immerse. Meanwhile, Luo Fengxue guarded her, feeding her medicinal pills and conveying her intentions to the surrounding cultivators. Immerse didn't know how long this battle lasted. She only felt like blood was flowing like a river. There were several times when she wanted to give up and enter the virtual sky world, regardless of whether others lived or died. However, the precarious situation of the formation made her realize the heavy burden on her shoulders. Even if she wanted to leave, she had to make some arrangements. Otherwise, she would be the first one to suffer the formation's backlash. 5th rank demonic beasts. Those are 5th rank demonic beasts. Someone shouted. Immerse suddenly looked up and saw two demonic beasts flying towards her from the horizon. In an instant, both her and Luo Fengxue's faces turned pale. 5th rank demonic beasts were in the early stage of the core formation realm. There were only foundation building cultivators here, and there were also numerous low-rank demonic beasts. Tienga! Han Qingyu shouted, "Give up! Give up on the formation! Let's go!" Immerse clenched her teeth, muttered a few incantations and changed her hand seals several times. She then pulled Luo Fengxue, took out the white silk handkerchief and dashed towards the gap in the formation. She temporarily used a secret technique to suppress the formation. Without anyone presiding over it, it could probably hold on for about an hour. During this time, whether they fought or fled, there would presumably be a result. "Senior Marshal Sister," Immerse asked once the four of them met up, "what should we do?" Han Qingyu swept her gaze over the surrounding cultivators who had already begun to flee in panic. She could only smile bitterly and say, We should also take advantage of the chaos to escape. We can't hold on any longer." The four of them were speechless. Han Qingyu pulled Luo Fengxue and shouted, "Fengxue, come with me. You two can take care of yourselves. If we escape, we'll meet up in a nearby courtyard." "Got it." Luo Fengxue followed Han Qingyu because Han Qingyu's cultivation level was the highest among them. Immerse and Wei Jiasi were both in the middle stage of the foundation building realm and had rich experience in fights of magical powers, so they could take care of themselves. Immerse stepped on the white silk handkerchief and held the shuttle of flying Apsara in her hand. She also secretly took out the land-fleeing ruler as a backup. If she was unlucky and ran into a 5th rank demonic beast, Immerse planned to use the land-fleeing ruler to immediately escape thousands of miles away and then use the virtual sky world to hide inside. Although she had already planned to do so, now that she was faced with the real situation, she still felt her palms sweating. That day when she controlled the four symbols formation to fight against a 5th rank demonic beast, it was because of the formation's power and because the demonic beast had already been exhausted by the others. That was why her soul-refining art was able to succeed in one strike. Now she didn't have the slightest bit of confidence. After summoning the shuttle of flying Apsara, Chinga dashed left and right, no longer holding back. Once the shuttle of flying Apsara closed, demonic beasts fell from the sky one after another. She didn't stop. After killing one, she immediately went to kill another one blocking her way. Sometimes, when she ran into second or third ranked demonic beasts, she would throw talismans at the same time, striving to quickly subdue the enemy. Flesh and blood flew everywhere and the ground was covered in blood. Everyone was fighting like crazy. Chinga, behind you. Upon hearing Luo Fengshue's voice, Chinga instantly controlled the white silk handkerchief to rise into the sky. After she turned sideways, she saw what was in front of her. A 5th-ranked two-headed eagle. She was really unlucky. There were only 2 5th-ranked demonic beasts, but one of them actually targeted her. Chinga's face turned pale. Her hand was already on the land-fleeing ruler, but that two-headed eagle had already flapped its wings. The spiritual aura she condensed in her hand was interrupted before it could be released. Chinga somersaulted on the white silk handkerchief, and the shuttle of flying Apsara instantly shot out. This was the first time she fought against a real high-ranked demonic beast. A 5th-ranked demonic beast in the early stage of the core formation realm. Back then, with second uncle's experience in fights of magical powers, he was still seriously injured despite being surrounded by 5 people, which clearly showed his fighting strength. There were also those cultivators from Yu clan and Zhou clan. If it weren't for their outstanding flying magic tools, they probably wouldn't have lasted that long. How could she deal with them alone now? Therefore she could only dodge and look for an opportunity to escape. The white silk handkerchief could both defend and fly. If it was used for defense, it could naturally block several attacks from demonic beasts. However, this wasn't a solution. She could only try her best to dodge their attacks and use the shuttle of flying Apsara to harass them for as long as possible so that she could use the land-fleeing ruler. Sure enough, she miscalculated. When facing a real high-ranked demonic beast, she didn't even have time to use the land-fleeing ruler. Chinga. Luo Fengshue watched anxiously. However, she saw Chinga moving up and down, left and right. She was as ethereal as the cloud and as swift as the wind, making it almost impossible to see her figure clearly. She was obviously dodging the 5th-ranked demonic beast's attacks, but it seemed like she was teasing it instead. Luo Fengshue was a bit dumbfounded. She already knew this nominal junior martial sister of hers had a rough life. She wandered from place to place and experienced many fights and tribulations. She was different from elite disciples of cultivation groups like them who grew up peacefully. However, she never expected that Chinga, who had just built her foundation, would have this kind of fighting strength and could contend with a 5th-ranked demonic beast. It seemed she still had a lot to work on. Fengshue, why are you in a daze? Wei Jiaxi, who had blocked a wave of attacks for Chinga, glowered at Chinga and said, "Take care of yourself first." But before Chinga could finish her words, she saw Wei Jiaxi controlling her flying sword to attack the 5th-ranked two-headed eagle. This 5th-ranked two-headed eagle had long been enraged by Chinga's attacks. It kept slapping its claws, sending lightning bolts towards Chinga one after another. Chinga was actually very anxious inside. Others couldn't see it, but she was having a hard time. How could it be that easy to dodge a 5th-ranked demonic beast's attacks? If she didn't have a magic weapon like the white silk handkerchief, she would have been struck down long ago. At this moment, Wei Jiaxi suddenly rushed over and slashed the two-headed eagle's wing. Although it didn't cause any damage because the wing was extremely hard, it still allowed Chinga to catch her breath. However, Chinga immediately shouted, "Senior Martial Sister Wei, don't worry about me. I have a way to escape." Upon hearing what Chinga said, Wei Jiaxi was dumbfounded. However, Chinga kept signaling her with her eyes, so after a moment of hesitation, Wei Jiaxi drew her sword and flew away. The two-headed eagle once again angrily clawed at her. Chinga leaped and dodged again. This time, while dodging, she brought the eagle away from the battlefield. Once she escaped, the eagle would definitely attack other people out of anger. She didn't care about other people, but Luo Fengshue and the others were in the vicinity. She didn't want this disaster to fall on them. Besides, after she got used to this demonic beast's rhythm, dodging became a lot easier. Demonic beasts were, after all, demonic beasts. They didn't know how to use talismans or magic weapons. They only knew how to use their bodies and the few spells they were born with to attack. How could they compare to smart human cultivators? In the end, Chinga even had the leisure to use the shuttle of flying Apsara to lure the two-headed eagle to attack her in order to adjust its direction. The two-headed eagle was flustered and exasperated. It suddenly flapped its wings and flew high, looking down at Enchanting from above. Right after that, it opened its mouth and shot out a thick lightning bolt. Enchanting was greatly shocked. This eagle had always been dull and didn't expect it would suddenly show its might. Without any time to think, she flipped her body over and grabbed the white silk handkerchief. With a wave of her hand, the white silk handkerchief turned into a dense brick wall, blocking all the lightning bolts above her. However, she was only in the middle stage of the foundation building realm after all. Even though this white silk handkerchief was a magic weapon, its power wasn't strong enough. She could still feel a strong spiritual aura pressure her even though she was separated by a brick wall. Her body was on the verge of collapse and she could barely stand. The power of a fifth-rank demonic beast's lightning bolts penetrated the brick wall and pressed down on her. She felt her meridians shaking violently, and she felt pain inch by inch. Her dantian was suddenly compressed, and her spiritual power was almost squeezed until there wasn't a drop left. Perhaps it was because of her willpower, or perhaps it was because her potential was stimulated, but Enchanting still didn't fall even though blood was already flowing from the corner of her mouth. She didn't want to die here. Eventually, the lightning bolt gradually weakened and eventually disappeared. Enchanting couldn't feel any power, so her legs suddenly went soft and she fell. The brick wall once again turned into the white silk handkerchief, which she held in her hand. As she fell to the ground, she felt her vision blurred. It was as if she used up all her strength just now. Perhaps no middle-stage foundation building cultivator would dare to confront a fifth-rank demonic beast's magic head-on, right? Enchanting, who was lying on the ground, realized she was actually in the mood to think about this. That double-headed eagle seemed to be extremely angry just now. Now that it landed in front of her, it wasn't in a hurry to rush forward to kill her. Instead, it let out a complacent cry. A fifth-rank demonic beast was equivalent to an early-stage core formation cultivator, so it had the basic ability to think. It must have been very angry after being fooled by her like that. As Enchanting thought about this, she couldn't help but smile and clench her fists. The demonic beast looked at her expression, then tilted its head and unexpectedly revealed a doubtful gaze. Upon seeing this, Enchanting muttered, "You want to know human emotions? You're still too early." Right after she finished speaking, the double-headed eagle seemed to have seen the sly smile in her eyes. However, before it could pounce on her, the little insect in front of it suddenly disappeared. Cough. Thousands of miles away, Enchanting coughed up a mouthful of blood. She immediately closed her eyes and silently recited an incantation. She was really lucky just now. That eagle didn't kill her immediately, giving her time to activate the land-fleeing ruler. However, for a fifth-rank demonic beast, a distance of thousands of miles was only a matter of a few breaths. If that demonic beast followed her scent and came here, it would be dangerous. She had to enter the virtual sky world as soon as possible. As she recited the incantation, a light the size of a broad bean slowly emerged between her eyebrows. As she recited the incantation, that light became brighter and brighter until it gradually turned into a huge bead which swallowed her in a flash. Lying in the small layer of the virtual sky world, Enchanting once again coughed up a mouthful of blood. Suddenly, a small creature staggered over to her side and whimpered. Enchanting forced herself to open her eyes and saw that it was the inferno beast she accidentally caught some time ago. She forced a smile. "I don't have time to feed you today." Before she could finish speaking, her head became heavy and she fell to the ground. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.